Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. How's everyone?
Morning.
Morning, everyone.
How's everyone doing today?
Great, thanks.
Cool.
Good.
Apologies
How
for
are
the
you?
late start. We were having some technical challenges trying to get online this morning. But we're here. So, how was everybody's week?
Interesting.
Oh, Lord. And then maybe interesting, you'd be like, boy. Anybody read and followed up and anybody did some advanced reading?
Yeah.
Little.
Yeah.
Okay, so we should have a good conversation today then, right?
Give it a go.
Anybody have any questions from last week's first class?
What's the difference between MRLO and a compliance officer?
MLRO is a title in law. It is the person responsible to submit SDRs to the Financial Intelligence Unit. You can be an MLRO and not be a compliance officer, and you can be a compliance officer and not an MLRO. The MLRO position reports directly to the board. The position should be a senior person in the organization who has independence and also who can make sufficiently senior decisions without interference. So that's the difference. You could be a compliance officer, but not an MLRO, and vice versa. You can be an MLRO and not a compliance officer. I've worked in organizations where the chief operating officer was the MLRO. And then I've worked in organizations where I've been head of the department or assistant head of the department and the MLRO all in one. Even though, you know, we normally put them together, they're two separate and distinct roles.
So MLRO is in one category and the compliance is over like a whole unit? No?
Well, the compliance could be a department, right? And it could be a person. The MLRO has to be a person. And usually the MLRO would be the head of the compliance department, usually. Because that person has to be senior enough and they have to have access to the information, right? So usually that's how it works.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
So we ain't doing
Good
videos today. I see everybody's video off with the exception of Annie, Maria, and Mr. Ferguson. Mr. Ferguson have his picture up, and so does Shakita. But everybody else, y'all videos off today. Y'all ain't prepared. Y'all ain't video ready today. What happened?
It's a rough morning.
Is it rough?
It's rough this morning.
That's funny. That's funny.
Every Saturday morning for me to get up out of my bed is be rough. What y'all think? And I drive here. I have to get ready, put on makeup, and drive here.
That is appreciated.
Right, because I figured some people may want in person, but I still only have 2 people today. Y'all don't come talk about, y'all can't have in person after I'm finished teaching, right? Because I'm not sure if any other lecturer is going to want to do in person or is going to be in person. So I want to hear y'all complaining to Ms. Dean about, oh, we won't come in. I gave y'all the opportunity last week. I got 2 people sitting up in class. When we sign off from y'all and we have our discussions, y'all don't be jealous, okay?
All right.
Okay. All right. Anybody, some people said they read 3, 4, and 5 is what we're going to cover today. Anybody have any questions from either of those chapters before we get started? If not,
Morning, sorry, this is Maria. I was a bit, I must say I was a bit overwhelmed when I saw those chapters because I thought I was in law school. Because it spoke to what was accepted, what's not accepted, and it's a whole lot of information. And forgive me for asking this. When are we gonna get the assignment question in advance, or are we gonna
You should
just
have
get
it.
it?
You don't have
in
it
a
yet?
month?
Yes, it's on
Where's-
the
You should have the assignment question.
It's on the,
Everything should be online. You should have access to it.
It's there. It's
okay,
there.
all right, that's my bad. Okay, I'll go back online because that was quite a bit of information that I saw, that I was looking at this week, the 3, 4, and 5. That was quite a bit, and the assignment question would help me to know exactly what the zoning on when I am, so I can know how to prepare. Okay, all right, that's my bad.
Now you can prepare Maria and me and do 6 to 8 yet.
No, I don't mean that. It's usually if I know what a question is gonna ask, well, the question is gonna ask something, well, the question is gonna be based on the entire thing. But at least when I'm reading, I'll know exactly what to pay extra attention to, so I can know how to prepare when the time comes.
Don't worry, Maria. We're going to have a class that's going to speak to what you should try and prepare for. Okay.
Okay,
So don't hurt your
Okay.
head too much about the question just yet. Let's just get through,
okay,
and then we'll provide some type of assistance and guidance and how to address the question, and also how to what I believe you should focus on. Now I'm obviously not going to know everything, but I've been doing this for a quick minute, so be able to get through some things together.
yeah, I was kind of, when I started to read, I was a little overwhelmed.
Don't be overwhelmed. It is a lot, and if you're not in banking, number one, it's kind of difficult to relate to some of the topics and some of the things that happen, because a lot of it is obviously financial services related, but obviously it is banking for the most part. It'll cover insurance and real estate and all of those things, but it's heavily leaning towards banking and trust services. Yes. So if you're not in financial services per se in your everyday life, it can be overwhelming. As you read, if you have questions, you either write them down so we can discuss them so the entire class can benefit, or put them in the WhatsApp group and we can discuss it during the week. Okay? That way you don't carry the whole week, Maria, the whole week.
Okay,
All right? Anybody else? Because 3, 4, and 5 is a lot.
yes, it was quite a, yeah, that was more than a lot.
Yes, it's a lot of information. A lot.
5, you can't never finish chapter 5. Oh,
Because that's,
Because
but you
you're
know what?
reading- Sorry, so go ahead, Angela.
I say, you know what I've been doing? I've been doing the little quiz at the end, because sometimes when you do the quiz, you attempt it and then it gives you the answer after you finish the attempt. So the little quiz at the end was good. And anybody else has attempted to do the quizzes.
I
Okay.
attempted, but I'm having problem with the exampler, so IT is working on it.
Oh, okay, all right.
Anybody else have any comments from their reading this week?
I think I'm a little unclear on the description or the explanation of the objective test. That's a chapter, objective test.
Okay, what chapter you in?
That's chapter, unit 3 or chapter 3.
Page?
I want to say page 75. Yes. Well, page 14, but the way it's numbered is 75.
Okay, my page 75 has the case of Shaw versus HSBC.
Okay, so maybe it's page 14 then.
14.
Yeah.
Okay, which is unit 3, which section? 3
sec-
point what?
3.3.
3.3, the offenses of failure to disclose.
Yes.
Okay, we'll talk about that then. you have a specific question, keep it for us to when we get there, okay?
Okay.
All right. Anyone else? Okay, I'm getting a feedback from somebody's background.
Roberts, that's where it coming from.
Okay. You have a question, Roberts?
My apologies, I didn't mute the mic when I came on the call.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, so obviously I've learned that units 3, 4, and 5 is a lot. For me who've been doing it, it's, I guess, normal because this is what you do every day. But the development is very important. So we're not going to, like I said last week, read, but we'll definitely go through the models, the different models of domestic anti-money laundering. And remember I said, a lot of this is going to be UK related, but you could apply it globally because it's the same minimum standards, right? Yes?
Yes.
According to the documents, UK went a bit further as well. So it's kind of international standard plus, but
Well,
that's just that standard.
The Bahamas is international standard plus plus.
Okay, good to know.
So we're I think in a lot of cases we're even a little further ahead and we take more stringent measures only because as a small IFC, you know, somebody always coming for us, right?
Okay.
Unlike the UK, who could come for them? Exactly. So when we have discussions, you realize that, hey, we do this and some other things as well. So AML and CFT, and obviously I've been adding PF, which is proliferation financing, has developed over the years. It's not always been here. I don't know if it was a strategic development or it just kind of happened, but it's been developing over the years. As we spoke last week, there are certain international bodies and organizations that have kind of forced the development. And because of how it was developed, right? Every country's legislation obviously is going to be different. We discussed last week how the UK and the US have extraterritorial laws as well that crosses borders. Also, it talks about how countries make laws just based on standards, global minimum standards. A lot of the AML regime in the Bahamas is based on FATF recommendations, right? Even though FATF recommendation isn't law, countries around the world enact laws to be compliant with those minimum, what we term minimum recommendations. This chapter, a lot of it speaks to development of AML in the UK, right? When you write your paper, like I've advised before, more than likely you're not going to use the UK as your jurisdiction. So we're going to have to bring this home to the Bahamas. And so a lot of this, we won't be specific in the reading of it, but to ensure that when you look at your question, you could relate to, okay, this happens in the UK, but then the other thing, this is what happens in the Bahamas, because you're going to be graded on what's in your paper, not what's in your book, right?
Okay.
So the difference between primary legislation and secondary legislation, we know, like as the UK, we're a Commonwealth country, right? So our legal system and our legal framework is obviously based on theirs. We still have the Privy Council as the ultimate, right? The last, they have the last say in our courts. And so it ties in pretty nicely for us as a Commonwealth country. And so the UK is obviously a good country in which we base our reading. And this is why this is a really good certification to have as well, because with this in mind, think about the Commonwealth nations. When you have this certification, for the most part, this can be used in pretty much any Commonwealth nation, Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, all of those international financial centers, because their legal system is based on the UK's legal system. Obviously, there are going to be loads and loads of things that cross over, right? So it talks about criminalizing money laundering. We discussed that earlier. And it also talks about common law national frameworks comprised of laws, which we know is made in Parliament, rules, which normally is perpetrated by regulators, and also the regulators give guidance, right?
Okay.
We're aware of that, everyone? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Right. So everything the central bank, the Securities Commission, ICB, the Compliance Commission, whatever regulation they set out for their licensees are based in laws. They all have a law that governs them. Yes. So primary legislation are the laws. It criminalizes money laundering. You know, we have POCA, we have the POCA is Proceeds of Crime Act. We have the Financial Transaction Reporting Act, and they have regs to go with them. The Financial Intelligence Unit also have an act, right? They also have guidelines to go with them. The Central Bank of the Bahamas has an act, right? So there are lots of laws that govern what the regulators put out there. You know, there's the Anti-Terrorism Act. There are loads of acts that are used to govern financial services. Some of you should have already known some of these acts because I think I suggested that you go through central bank's AML guideline last week to see. Did anybody do that? Because there's a plethora of rules and, well, actually the plethora of acts that governs financial services.
Yeah.
Anybody do that?
Yeah, I downloaded it from, I got it from them. It was,
Okay, so tell us then, Mr. Ferguson, based
it's
on
a lot.
right.
It's
So
a lot.
name a few that I didn't name.
Oh my goodness. You really will go to now? I mean, I can't remember them. Like,
Oh, just one or two. For those in banking, y'all should be able to answer me because we do annual training on this every year. I already say POCA, I already say ATA, I said FIU and FTR, A and RR. What else?
Isn't there like a traveler's, what is it, currency and
Currency declaration, correct?
stuff.
Come on, because these are your primary legislation that governs AML.
Right.
Let's go. I know I'm not going to move from it until somebody comes up with something else that I have not said. I need you to start to be able to own this, own the information.
Yeah.
This isn't going to just be a, oh, I remember type situation. Come on, people, y'all in front of a computer, Google it if y'all have to.
Is one the Gaming Commission Act or something like that?
It ain't the Gaming Commission Act, but you close. Which you wanna know which act governing the sector you work in?
Gaming regulations, gaming rules and regulations.
But what it name?
Gee.
Yeah, that's where I want you to go. Tell me what it name.
Okay.
Come on, people.
Looking.
Okay. Because these are things that you're going to have to reference, right?
Yeah. Oof.
So we don't want it to be just, oh, you're talking off the top of your head. We need you to know. Nobody else? That was POCA. Proceeds of crime is POCA.
Yeah, that's that.
See, she said IBC Act, yes. It is a lot. So tell us, Jarrell. You say it now, you say it loud because you're not, your audio is off. There's a credit reporting act. We're going to talk about that when we talk about liquidity. Remember we talked about Basel last week? What's the difference between that and reporting regulations? Because the act is the actual legal definition. The regs is the actual practical guidelines on how the act has to be carried out. So a lot of laws of acts and then regulations. I see someone put something in the chat. Yes, the wire transfers regulation that governs every time the dollar converts to US dollar.
Yeah, Anti-Terrorism Act, the Financial Transaction Reporting Act, the regs, FIU, well, you know, the poker, that's basic, but whew, there's a lot.
You have the Financial and Corporate Service Providers Act. Did we say that?
No, we didn't say that, but we need to say that because that's a very important legislation.
Important one.
Been
Yes.
amended recently, and it's very important because that legislation in and of itself actually registers compliance officers throughout the Bahamas. Outsourced compliance officers, that is.
Okay.
So, okay, good. I wanted you all to take the time out to physically go through. So this is how I'm going to kind of build your knowledge, because it's just not the textbook, right? If you're going to be in this industry, you have to be familiar with the rules that govern the industry. You can't play the game and don't know the rules, right?
Okay.
So bookmark that. That is going to be mucho importante going forward. Yes?
Yes.
And then obviously the secondary legislation, that's the regs. That's all of the procedures and things that, you know, the central bank would say we're supposed to do as licensees, or all of the regulators actually. And then organizations base their policies and procedures on those, right?
Okay.
Obviously,
Gotcha.
industry also issues guidelines and guidance. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Bahamas Financial Services Board, AIBT. They're always industry guidelines that are being issued as well.
Right.
So those things, you guys, that's your homework. In addition to reading, try and see how much you can put together from a regulatory standpoint of the laws, the regulators that govern the industry, as well as this. You don't have to do all, but at least the major ones. If you know you're working in real estate, see whatever act or guidelines govern that, right? If you're working in insurance, see what governs that. I mean, in banking, have plenty that governs it, so you have a lot to choose from. Because there's the Banks and Trust Companies Act as well, right?
Okay.
Just to try and familiarize yourself, because as you add to your knowledge, you're going to grow the depth of what is going to go into your paper. Don't wait until you get to your paper to be trying to cram all these things into your mind. Okay? So,
Ms. Hans,
hi, Omar.
Ms. Hans, tell me something. You mentioned the regulations. Does every act have a accompanying regulation?
I'm not sure, I don't think so, but a lot of the ones in financial services, they do. I don't know if poker have a regulation, but I know FTRR and FTRA have one.
Have it.
So not all. ATA doesn't have, ATA is the Anti-Terrorism Act. I don't think they have regs.
So the regulations are what? Actually the practical, is it an interpretation of the act, or is it like a practical guideline?
It's a practical guideline of how the industry is to be governed.
Okay.
So like with the FIU and the FTRA, the FTRA, Financial Transactions Reporting Act, obviously dictates what is supposed to happen as it relates to STRs and financial transactions reporting, right? But the regs actually tell you need a money laundering reporting officer. The person has to be this, the person has to be that. It speaks to you how you are supposed to be governed as it relates to the act itself.
Okay.
Okay.
Would you suggest area someone is totally new to the industry to zoom in?
So Jurel is asking, would I suggest an area? Say it again.
that's totally new to the financial industry, like for starters.
For someone that's new to the industry, for starters,
Yeah, like which area should I start with?
she wants to know which area she should start with, since they all have what?
There's specific areas already, real estate, banking.
I can't say, it depends on what you like to do. It depends on what you like to do, and it depends on where you want to actually go, which field you want to enter. Like I said, somebody in here is do trust, and I was like, I have my TEP, but I think trust boring. Who it was? Simone, that's you?
No, ma'am, that wasn't me.
Okay, so for me, it's like, I like banking, but I've worked for an insurance company. I've worked for a company that deal in securities. So it just depends on where you want to go. All of it is, I mean, financial services on the whole is wide, right? When you get in, I think then you have a better opportunity to choose which area you want to specialize in. I loved gaming, but gaming is just a lot. Hi. That's what she said. See, you say it all the way out. She said FCSBA. I mean, remember what acronyms? Yeah, and that's a new one.
I think a lot of unions fell more in that aspect of that in terms of activities that any other legislation, regular union.
Right. Yolanda is actually in class today, and so that's why her video is on, but her mic is muted, so we don't get a feedback. And she was just advising from her experience that a lot of Bahamians actually work under the Financial Corporate Service Providers Act, which is true, because a lot of people like myself that do outsource compliance and other activities as a Bahamian and not a foreign entity, we are covered by that act. And that's why Angela was saying it's a very important act. Okay, Sam is saying, he said nobody's hearing him. Okay. So the UK's AML CFT legislation and strategy. This section 2 delves a lot into how the UK handles AML. There's the primary legislation, there's the secondary legislation, there's the industry and professional guidance that they talk about. The FCA is their primary regulator. We don't have a primary regulator per se in terms of one regulator. We have several regulators. We've discussed them, talked about them already this morning. And then the UK framework, just how I wanted you to go through the Bahamas legislative framework. When we get to section 3, it speaks to the UK's primary legislation, right? These legislations are all important, however, as it relates to writing your paper and being familiar with the jurisdiction in which you reside,
Okay.
would want to find the correlating law in the Bahamas.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
I don't usually focus on these laws because these aren't laws that you're going to operate under.
Okay.
Unless there is an extraterritorial law, but these ones primarily are local UK legislation. And all of the offenses that go with them. You see, they have a POCA from 2002. Our Proceeds of Crime Act just was overhauled in 2018, right? So a lot of 3 that was overwhelming some of you is UK based, very UK specific. So no need to be overwhelmed with it.
All right.
And then they have different definitions as well as it relates to some of the legalities, right? Because obviously their definitions would go with their laws and ours would go with us in the Bahamas. So when you look at 3, the substantive offenses, do go and look at Proceeds of Crime Act for the Bahamas 2018 and look at the substantive offenses of money laundering, because it's going to be similar, but it's not going to be the exact same. Our Proceeds of Crime Act is so wide, it will catch a mosquito. Seriously. So we're not going to focus on the UK specific offenses. I want you to look at the offenses under POCA. The one thing that we're going to talk about though is the offense of tipping off. I'm not sure if everybody knows what tipping off means. Can somebody who is not in financial services tell me what is meant by tipping off?
I can.
I can't see who it is who's talking.
That's Omar.
Omar,
Yes.
no, not you. You can't answer. I just had you last year, so I know you know what it is. Not you.
All right.
I'll give it
Omar
a
was
shot.
my student in intermediate AML folks, so I know what Omar knows. I want somebody else who ain't been in my class who take intermediate with somebody else.
And I'll take a stab at it. It's basically giving unauthorized information about a person who is suspected in being involved in an illegal transaction or any type of illegal transaction or an investigation of an illegal transaction. You either inform the person or you inform someone who is not part of the sterile environment. And the information gets out and the person, obviously would attempt to protect themselves.
He's straight up from law enforcement. You couldn't just give us a clear answer, Mr. Ferguson. Like, really? I feel like I just read your briefing or something.
I just give it a shot. That's all bad.
Oh my God. Omar, I may need you to come tell us for real. Hey, not in Mr. Ferguson's law enforcement briefing term. Simple. What is tipping off? Thanks, Mr. Ferguson. You're actually correct, but that's a long way. You lose some people. I know you lose some people. I'm trying to hold on to that definition myself. Tell us, Omar, in a simple way.
I could give an example to try to explain the sounds. So let's say that we suspect you're a teller, or you have a position, you work at a bank, and you have information that you suspect someone of money laundering. You will report that to it's reported to your money laundering reporting officer, and you know the person. So you now go and call a person and say, hey, they're going to be investigating you, or they sending a STR to verify you as a person of interest in suspected money laundering. When you tell that person that information, as an employee from the bank, you have tipped off, you've committed the offense of tipping off.
Thank you very much, Omar, for the explanation. Yes, it's the exact same thing Mr. Ferguson said, but we understand this one clearer, right? Does everybody understand what Omar said?
Yes, it did.
Right. So that is when you actually divulge information to persons. It don't even have to be the person who the report is being made against, Anytime you divulge information to another person that should not be privy to an STR that has been filed or that is contemplating being filed, you have committed the offense of tipping off. Because in the banking arena, not because you work in the bank, you need to know that an STR is being filed. You should be a party to the actual transaction, right? Because you could be, let's just say in the private banking world, the banker. I don't have to tell the banker, I don't have to tell the client. But if I tell the banker's assistant, I just tipped off, right? I just committed tipping off because the banker's assistant could tell the banker who could then tell the client. So it doesn't necessarily always have to be just the person involved. It could be anybody that does not have or should not have access to the information, because STRs primarily, the transaction of filing an STR primarily sits between an MLRO and the FIU. Now, obviously, sometimes you have to make management aware, depending on the situation of what's going on. But this is a real, when you watch the police movies or whatever it is, we have some law enforcement here. What they say classified, need to know. That's the basis on which STRs are filed. Classified information, and it's always on a need to know basis, always. Outside of that, it's tipping off. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ferguson and Omar, for helping us with that. There's a case in here, Shaw versus HSBC. If you have an opportunity, please read it. It's a very interesting case, and it's always used in the AML sphere because it was a big deal in the UK. The duty of customer confidentiality. Now, this is something, let me tell you all, I have a pet peeve with this in the Bahamas. Oh, okay. Before we roll, come off, y'all please make sure I write your names down on the register, okay? Huh? Is Regina on? Miss Dean is asking. I see no Regina. No, she ain't on. Oh, my on. Yeah. Jarrell, spend that off me, please.
Miss Hans, let Miss Dan know I need to see him on.
Miss Dan. Omar said I need to harass you because he need to see you. I know that's all he tell me. She say about what, Omar? Did you get the link from ICA?
I got the link. However, the course material, I'm still lacking in the course material. I downloaded some.
It on there, Omar?
I don't know. Maybe I needed a degree or something.
Yeah, don't worry, Omar. You in the group, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Jarrell will sort you out. We can put it in the group so you don't have to be stressing on Miss Dean.
Okay.
Miss Dean said she can't be getting stressed, and I with her. I can't have you stressing her.
All right.
You can be straight though. Jarrell will put the information so you can get it, okay?
Okay.
All right. See that? You all see the ICA webinar on sanctions. Miss Dean is asking me to ask you guys on the ICA website. She said, check it and it'll be helpful. Yes. It's plenty. Let me tell you all. If you all think you're all coming into compliance to just be one track, it's another thing. You'll get another thing coming because you're all over the place. Right? There's lots going on, especially when you have an ICA membership. So I get ACAMs, I get ICA, I get ACFCS, I get TEP, I get all kind of things. So you can imagine trying to keep up, right? That's how you all gonna have to be. Multitasking kings and queens, especially when it's free information. Ain't nothing like free information. Because what you know, my old boss told me before, what you have in your head is what you sell. No one could take from you what's in your head. No matter how much times you get fired, you could find a next job because it appears. But it's only going to be up here if you make an effort to put it up there. It ain't gonna just go up there by itself. Yes?
Yeah. Gotcha.
This is an industry that's ever changing. The minute you get used to something, it doesn't change. So I'm gonna need y'all to be very, very proactive is the word I'm actually looking for, because it takes a whole lot to be a really good compliance officer. It takes a lot of skill and it takes a lot of balance, because you could get consumed with it. And I know you have other things, outside of this, but if you're going to be a really good compliance officer, you're going to have to learn how to balance, how to focus, how to be to work and watch a webinar and do your work all at the same time. But if there's something free, check the ICA site. I know Baco also have a free webinar this week. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, with Baco. But if you're interested, I will drop the link in the chat group, how to register. It's free, it's open. And just to learn, if this is an industry that you want to be in, it'll be helpful for all of you to kind of get in to see what's going on. And ain't nothing like networking in the Bahamas. Y'all know what a thing go, right? That's what the young people say. That's what my children say, actually. Y'all know what a thing go, right? A lot of it is not only what you know, but what? Jarrell said it, who you know. And you're only going to know who in the industry if you participate in industry events. Yes?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, sorry, somebody in the class have a question.
Okay, so with this case,
Mhm.
Can we use this thing or is it?
So Yolanda is asking if they could use the Shaw versus HSBC case, right? In a paper. If you get a paper and you're using the Bahamas, I can almost guarantee you, you probably won't find an example as it relates to banking and being fined and things of that nature, because central bank don't publish their fines, right? Unless the Securities Commission take you to court, you ain't gonna know, right? So you will have to determine whether you can reference it in your notes, in your paper, or if you can use it as an example, because you can use examples from other countries, even if you were using the Bahamas as your base jurisdiction. Yes, you all get that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Everybody understand
Okay.
what I just said?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. Because like I said, some things, obviously, UK legislation is pretty similar to the Bahamas legislation. And there are some cases as it relates to penalties and stuff, you're gonna have to use examples from other countries, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So you can use examples from the book. Just make sure you do your referencing properly. So 3.6, the duty of customer confidentiality. I think I started to say this is a pet peeve for me. It's a pet peeve for me, especially in the Bahamas, because we do not take confidentiality serious.
Mm.
We don't take it serious at all. It's all about who you know, right? So what I said just leads right into this. Banking confidentiality, when all of us sign them contracts to say we working for the bank, that's the one thing we agreed to do. Not disclose the people business, right? That's the one thing most people don't do. Because I can guarantee you, if I really want to, I can find out all of your banking information from somebody in a retail bank. And people do it. And I try to figure out like that in your business, like why are you even interested? But people do it. And it upsets me because this isn't something that you were just told. This is something that you sign. I've worked in retail banks. I've worked in international banks. You're day one. When you walk into the bank, that's the first thing you sign off. You sign your contract before you start, but on day one, when you reach there, they give you that AML manual and they give you a confidentiality contract, right? Stop asking people, and I don't know if you always do it or not, but I'm just going to say it. Stop asking people for people business, please. Unless you have a valid reason. If you're not in law enforcement, like Mr. Ferguson and Mr. Neely, in your business, please don't do it. Because apart from the fact that there are people who are going to tell you, you are also wrong for asking. I worked as a teller in Commonwealth Bank for years, and I can tell you, people always, they nosy, especially as females. They would know what the fella who they want check, how much money in his bank account. I just being serious, and I mean, as an example, it's from my experience. Why you need to know how much money you have? You either like him or you don't. You understand? It's a practical example, but it happens. And people don't think about it like that because they say, oh, well, mind you, they can't tell you it on the phone or whatever, but they write it on a piece of paper and bring it home. And with these days and time, everybody got their phone in their pocket, right? They take a picture and send it. Please, 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 let's not do that, okay? Let's not encourage people to do that, and let's not do that ourselves whenever we come into that position. When you are a bank employee, you take an oath to keep people business confidential. You can be fired for breach of confidentiality. We don't take it serious because in the Bahamas, we just think everybody's talking business, right? But no, let's make sure that we are not in that group of people that just disclose information to other people on air or for reasons other than law enforcement. Yes?
Right. Right.
So there's an example in the book about how a scam worked and things like that. Just make sure every single thing that you do as it relates to your work, unless the person needs to know the information, just tell them, it's okay. It's none of your business. Be nice about it. I mean, someone like me would probably say it ain't none of your business, but be nice about it and say, no, I don't think you should have access to the information, so I can't do that. Okay. So section 4 of chapter unit 3 speaks to the UK's framework, the secondary legislation and regulation. Like I said to you guys, we don't need to focus specifically on all of these because you need to get the correlating Bahamian legislation, right? Please, we have our own regs and laws that govern ML, PF, and TF or CTF. You can't have a Bahamian version of this textbook if you're trying to do an international certification. You can't, how you could, this is copyrighted material, how you could change the people material. Jarrell trying to change people material, y'all? Remember now, this same diploma is taken around the world. Everybody gets this book. Just like ACAMs, they don't care which country you in. It's a US certification. It is what it is. It have what it have. This one is, in my opinion, a good one for us because remember the laws are based, our Bahamian laws are based on UK, the UK model, right? So it aligns pretty well. Now, when you do ACAMs and you get into their legislation, it's completely different because, they have city, county, federal, all kinds of different things, right? Unlike the UK Commonwealth law. So for us in the Bahamas, this is a really good one to do because we can follow from a legislative perspective, we can follow this, yes? And even if it's not the exact same thing, it's similar in nature. So the FCA is the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, and they responsible for many things, right? They have objectives, just like all regulatory bodies. The Bahamian version, what I would say more comparable to the FCA is the central bank, as well as the Securities Commission, but it's like having all of them under one roof.
Okay.
So the FCA has 4 regulatory objectives, which is also important for you to know, but it's important for you to know only in the extent that you recognize how they're regulated, not necessarily in the specifics, because if you're going to write a paper, you're going to have to know how the central bank,
Right.
yes, the objectives of the central bank. But they have, one of the rules is to regulate and supervise firms to reduce financial crime, including ML, right? They also ensure that UK markets function well, which is something that the SCB in the Bahamas would do, right? So for them, they have a prudential regulatory authority, which is their PRA, and then they have financial conduct, which is their supervisory authority. And so they have like a twin peak in the UK, as opposed to us who have regulators based on the industry in which you conduct business. So ICB, which is the Insurance Commission, they will regulate insurance. Compliance Commission regulates anybody that is I'm not going to tell you. Does anybody know the category of licensee is licensed by the Compliance Commission? I almost told you guys.
It's the lawyers, the accountants, the real estate agents, the land developers, the dealers in precious metals and stones.
Okay, Simone, so tell us what that grouping is known as.
Like an overarching name is what you mean for an umbrella term? Oh.
It's an umbrella term, yes. Starts with D.
Oh, sorry. Designated non-financial businesses and professions.
That. Now say it all out. How we say it in this rule.
DNFBPs.
Yes. Y'all get that?
Yeah, I get the DSNBPs, but I didn't know what the breakdown was. She said dealers in precious stones and.
Say it again. Say it again, Simone, so Mr. Ferguson could get it.
Dealers in precious metals and metals and stones, so like John Bull, you know, with Colombian emeralds.
Okay.
And then you have the real estate brokers and the land developers, the lawyers and the accountants. Yes.
Okay, cool.
Pretty much anybody that does financial transactions with the public, but then a bank or trust company or a securities investment firm. So their financial services, right? They're not covered by the insurance commission because they're not insurance. Yes, they're not covered by SDB because they're not securities related. They're not covered by central bank. So they have an umbrella covering, which is the compliance commission, because they all have to have compliance officers and MLROs.
Okay.
Omni Financial will probably fall under the Securities Commission of the Bahamas because they're lending money. Money lenders fall under SCB. They fall under FCSP. Yeah, the act governs them, but the regulator is the Securities Commission because the Securities Commission regulate everybody that falls under the FCSP. FCSP is Financial Corporate and Service Providers. Okay. So the UK regulatory model we can look at, but we don't need to focus on too much because we don't live in the UK and we don't intend to practice in the UK unless one of y'all trying to move somewhere soon. But still, when you get there, you'd know the rules. So, point 5 is about Jersey. Y'all know Guernsey and Jersey very close to the UK.
Yeah.
Right. So 5, we're not going to delve in too much. You see 6 is Guernsey. They have their own laws. We need to make sure that we do our own Bahamas relevant laws, comparatively speaking, okay? 6.2 speaks about suspicious activity reporting in the Bahamas. We call it transaction reporting. Does anybody know the difference between transaction reporting and activity reporting? Or they want to give a good guess?
Interesting.
Omar, we didn't talk about this last year.
Financial reporting versus activity reporting?
Especially STR versus SAR.
Isn't that one is internal?
No.
Okay.
Anybody else? Look at the difference in the words. Let's go, people. The difference between STR and SAR.
Well, I know the STR would, and that has to be filed by the MLRO, right?
Right.
And then they, that's basically that, well, it feeds off of like a UTR when you look at the transactions and stuff that, well, suspicion of like different transactions that the person may have conducted on their account, or if it's anything out of their norm or something like that, I think.
You getting there, girl? You getting there? Keep going.
Yeah.
You definitely in the right vein.
Okay, I give it over to somebody else for the second one.
No, man, stop that, man. You could finish this. You right there.
The suspicious activity report. I don't know.
You just said it. What's the difference between the activity and the transaction? You literally just said it.
The activities that they do. Well, what an activity and transaction like? Okay, I know.
Man, Why are you giving up so quick? Anybody else listen to what she say and could kind of from that?
Let me give it a shot. The suspicious transaction report mainly deals with financial transactions. And the suspicious activity report deals with any activity that may be suspicious, but it's not necessarily a transaction. For instance, a transaction will be like maybe their parameters of account operations say they'll only be sending 1 million. And now they want to send 2 million. That may be a suspicious transaction, or it's going to a place that may be suspicious. So the receiving party may be suspicious, but a suspicious activity could possibly be maybe they had a hit on World Check, or you found something about the client and you need to report it, but it's not necessarily a transaction per se.
There you go.
Am I on the right line?
You're on the right line, my dear. So the activity covers any activity over the account. The transaction is going to be a specific transaction or a specific series of transactions. Yes?
Okay.
They're all suspicious, but it doesn't necessarily mean, like she said, it's outside of the stated profile of the client. Because now, you know, a suspicious activity doesn't necessarily mean it's criminal. You could just have a suspicion. But if you have a suspicion and you do some investigation before you file an STR, you may be able to clear it up. So as an example, right? Let's just say I inherited $1 million. Obviously, once the wire hits my account, the bank is going to freeze that money because it's suspicious where I'm getting $1 million from. But now when the bank reach out to me and say, okay, we need you to bring in the source of funds for this, all I need to do is get the lawyer to get the will, right? That says I've inherited this $1 million. It's no longer suspicious because there is a justification for it. Yes?
Okay.
So in that case, it'll be an unusual transaction as opposed to a suspicious transaction because it would have been justified prior to submitting an STR. Yes? Okay.
Question. So the example you gave just now with the will, that would be the SAR or the STR?
It'll be an SAR because the activity is suspicious. But if you do the investigation, it doesn't have to lead to an STR because when you're doing an STR, before you file an STR with the FIU, you should have conducted your own internal investigation. You don't just, receive an internal STR and then send it out. It's your job as the MLRO, and it is expected of you to do an investigation. It's only when you determine, hey, there's something adding up here, all of these things look like something wrong, something missing, is only then that you send an STR to the FIU, submit an STR to the FIU.
Okay, thank you.
Claire, everybody clear on that?
Yeah, I just want to know, what about the interest of time? Let's say a large amount of money is transferred to someone's account and you have a reason to say initiate an SAR. It's $1 million, but this person walks in the bank after the money is transferred and they want to withdraw 100,000. So the SAR now, between the SAR and the STR, there's some time frames because, excuse me, I was reading sections 3, and ordinarily the UK would say, okay, there's a 7-day, for use of a better phrase, freeze. And then there's an additional 31-day if you want to extend the investigation. The FCA, sorry, the NCA extends the investigation. Now, in the interest of time now, I mean, locally, what do we do in that instance? Because you have this, you're obviously concerned about this activity, and the person wants to withdraw some funds. So what do we do in terms of reporting?
So let me enlighten you guys. Everybody that has a bank account at any of the retail banks, I can almost guarantee you all didn't read the fine print when you all sign up for them accounts, right? The bank has a right to deny you access to your money for 7 days.
Right.
Someone
right.
like me who read it, if you come in there, right, and I already know, or I have been advised that, okay, this $1 million, and you come in there the next day, you know, because the money don't just hit your account right away. Most retail banks, before they let the money hit your account, they have that waiting. You have to come in there and fill out the source of funds declaration. So when you come in there to fill out the source declaration, if you ain't bringing the right information, that's the first thing I can deny you, no access.
Okay.
Secondly, if you carry on bad, someone like me could call the police and have you escorted out. And then I'm going to call the if I'm the MLRO, I'm going to call the FIU and ask them to send me a freeze order, because I've done it in the past. Just because you were not silly. So legally, I would have gotten your account frozen for 72 hours. And if you continue to act bad, I will freeze it again. And if I have, you have no kind of documentation, I just get an ex parte. For all the people who don't know what ex parte is, I get a judge in their chambers to place a freeze order on the account, which can happen in 0 time, because with financial matters, they don't take long, right? So regularly, Mr. Ferguson, let me advise you, if you go in the bank tomorrow on Monday and you say I want to close down my account, they can tell you no. I don't want any of you guys to be fooled into thinking, oh, it's my money, so I can do what I want to do with it.
Right.
You agree to open up that account, the bank has the right to deny you access to your own money for 7 days. And in 7 days, trust me, they can get the FIU to give them a freeze order. So the immediate situation that you are speaking about can only happen if you have a compliance person on MLRO who ain't wise.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It can, because when the bank asks you how much money you're going to put in your account, it's because they're creating a risk profile for you. They're not going to tell you that, but that's what it's for. So if Mr. Ferguson and Mr. Neely, they work for government, we already know they ain't making $100,000 because that's all the prime ministers make, right? So if they come in there and they say they expect to put $100,000 on their salary account, we don't have a problem. From my standpoint, that account ain't getting open, because you're getting $100,000 from, and you work for the government. Because your ID, right? Even if you bring in your passport, I'm going to ask you where you work, because that's one of the questions, right? Where are you employed? So if he tells me, oh, I'm employed by the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, and I'm going to be expecting $100,000 on this account, my first question is use the Commodore A. This is what the banks do it for. Obviously, they don't want to come out and tell you all of that, but we're building a risk profile. That's the first thing. He done high risk, because you're working for government and you have all this money coming in. Where's it coming in from? Now, obviously, he may have a business on his, a side business. And so if he can justify, well, listen, I have this company, Dimitri Ferguson, trading as whatever it is he does on the side or whatever. Yeah, it's understandable, but not from a salaried account, right? So they ask you those questions because they want to build a profile, because building a profile is the only way for them to know whether or not you are doing what you say you're supposed to be doing with the account. Yes?
I got you.
Because a lot of times people just put numbers on there. Oh, well, they think they can make $5,000 a month, or they think this, or they think that. But let's just say you can make $5,000 a month, but all of a sudden things pick up for you when you're making 10, 15. As a compliance person, seeing all of your transactions, because there's somebody that's monitoring it, or there's a system in place. Hold on, wait, this person been clocking in 15. This person been clocking in $20,000 a month. Block. When you try to go to the ATM, you can't get your money. And you use block. I mean, the bank uses that block for lots of reasons, but one of the reasons they block your account is for you to have to come to the bank. When you come into the bank, then we can sit you down and ask you whatever questions that are necessary to be answered. Yes?
Yeah.
So we would do that for more reasons than one. But when we ask you all of those questions on all of, when you're filling out your bank opening forms, we do that so we can have a profile, so that when it's time for the transaction to be monitored, it has to fall in line with it. A lot of times people's lives change and they don't ever go back into the bank to say nothing. And then when their account get blocked, they shock. Oh, I can't stand these banks. Oh, they always doing things with your money. Have you gone back into the bank and say, hey, listen, I've gotten a promotion, or I've changed jobs and my salary has increased by X amount. So my profile is going to be changed. I know nobody's doing that. They don't have to call you. It's your responsibility to advise the bank of what's happening with your finances. I work for myself. And because I know how my banks operate, when I get new contracts, I go into the bank and I take them a copy. So when they put holds on my account because amounts come in that they're not sure of or whatever, I go right to them when I fill in my source of funds declaration. Check your files. I didn't bring in the copy. So ain't no reason for you to hold up on my money. Now, if you ain't filed it, it didn't have nothing to do with me. But I would have given it to you. And I do that all the time. My bankers love me because they ain't got to worry. Because I'm that person, because I'm in compliance, I'm that person that goes into my bank and I go to my relationship person and I say, listen, this is the situation. This is what it is. Even when I'm traveling, you have to call in and get your credit cards, whatever. If I know I'm going to be out of the country for more than 2 weeks, I go in. Because I may have transactions happening while I'm out of the country. So obviously, if I'm away, I'm in the UK and transactions happening in the Bahamas, they're trying to figure out, well, what's going on here? No, let me sit down and discuss with you. This is what I'm expecting over the next 4 weeks. And so I don't have no hangups, no delays. You should have a relationship with your bank if you are somebody that, not just okay, taking out my money once a month. So I need to have no relationship with them. I'm because I have a business of my own. And I also have a job. I try to make sure that the compliance person who dealing with my account, they ain't got no problems out of me. Plus, it's convenient. Once you've already established a relationship, I know I've had my accounts blocked on numerous occasions. I was in the UK. I make a phone call or I send an email. Okay, we can block the account. When you come in, just come in and fill out the form. Fill out the form is a bank requirement. But because I have a relationship and I have my documentation on file, they could wait for that before they release my money, right? Like I say, relationship. Generally, people don't do that in retail banking. In offshore banking, they will tell you, well, they had a life event or they sold a house for $2.something million, whatever the amount is. And so expect to see the account get credited with this. Most wealthy people don't put all their money in one account. So if they sell a house for 5 million, they can put 2.5 here, one there, and one next 1 point whatever someplace else, and they go do whatever else with the rest. But that is the way you should operate with your bank. So the immediate, back to what you were saying, Mr. Ferguson, the immediate action can be delayed for as long as the compliance MLRO person needs it to be. Only most people don't really know that, so they get away with certain things. But if you're going to come into any bank I work for, it's a no. You go wait. Because I need to make sure that my institution don't get fined for negligence. If I ask the right questions and you lie to me, it's something different, right? Than me not asking at all. Because when the regulators come in and they look at these accounts, because you know they're asking for them accounts, what have the most transaction, the one with the most money, all kinds of different things. I'm going to be able to say, I asked Mr. Ferguson where you get that $1 million from. Mr. Ferguson say this, but Mr. Ferguson couldn't prove it. So I give Mr. Ferguson the money. You have to be able to justify your actions. Yes?
Right, okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Everybody clear?
Yes, yes.
Okay, 6.4 speaks to compliance with international AML CFT PF standards. We discussed that before. Chapter 7, not chapter 7, sorry, section 7 of 3. I'm going to kind of speed it up because an hour is gone and we ain't finished unit 3 yet. Alternative national AML models. When anything that's national, like I told you, let's stick to with the Bahamas for the most part. You should read these so you can get an idea of how globally it works, so you will be familiar with the global landscape. Yes? So the learning outcome for this chapter, it talks about being able to describe Jersey, UK, whatever. It also speaks to understanding the implications of the EU money laundering directives for UK and other European financial services firms. That will come into play for firms based in the Bahamas that have headquarters in Europe and the UK, right? You have to also be able to recognize the various money laundering offenses. It says under UK law, but you're going to look up POCA and find the offenses in the Bahamian law, right? We spoke the tipping off. Everybody should know what that is. Predicate criminal conduct. Anybody wants to tell us what that is, just so we can ensure that the learning outcomes have been met? We get two officers here. Any one of y'all could tell us what predicate criminal conduct means.
Selling of drugs.
Huh?
The selling of drugs, which leads the person to try to get the money into the financial system.
That's an example. But what does it mean overall? That's an example.
Right. Overall, it means the offense, well, in my layman's term, the offense that actually broke the law.
Right. So there's an offense that leads to another offense, right?
Yes.
Right. So you selling drugs. So the proceeds that you make from the drugs, money laundering. In your example.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Mens rea. One of the attorneys tell us what mens rea means. I mean, I know what it is, but I want everybody else to know what mens rea is.
Basically, it's having a guilty mind.
Right. And what do you need to what's the word I'm looking for? When you are found guilty, there are two things that is necessary: mens rea and what else?
And actus rea.
And what is actus rea?
That is the actual act, well, carrying out whatever the criminal act is.
Right. So with the criminal conduct, if you're thinking about it, right? Read the Proceeds of Crime Act. If you're thinking about it, you obviously know that it has some consequence, because you know you know it wrong. Even if you never read POCA, you know dealing drugs wrong, because it breaks the laws of the Bahamas, right? So the minute you thought about it and then you did it, when you get locked up, you can't make no noise, because you would have committed both the mens rea and the actus rea. So Foxhill should be a home. Yes? Also, you have to understand the obligations of financial services business for reporting suspicious activity, which we talked about, while appreciating the slightly different rules that apply in various jurisdictions as to what constitutes suspicion. Remember, we talked about what's suspicion, what's unusual. And then you have to be able to outline how AML, CFT, PF laws and regulations are implemented in various European countries. Well, for us, you need to definitely focus on the Bahamas as even though this information you need, you have to focus on the Bahamas. So laundering the process of tax evasion. The purpose of this unit is to explain what is meant by tax evasion and tax avoidance. There is a difference, and provide an overview of international approaches to tax liabilities and the role of the money laundering reporting officer in relation to criminal and civil liability linked to taxation. We talked a little bit about the MLRO in the last chapter, and then consider the role of customer due diligence in preventing a financial services business from becoming implicated in the laundering of money that has been illegally withheld from the tax authorities. Okay, I am freezing in this room. So for those who haven't looked at the chapter, please look at it. Give me 5 minutes. I need to run to my car and get my jacket. I will be right back. Yes?
Okay.
Everybody else?
Okay.
This is
Okay.
this is our break, okay?
Okay, all
Okay.
right. Okay.
I'm back.
Okay. 5 minutes on the dot.
I's a banker. I know time. Right, Angela? We Swiss bankers. Angela, back me up here. Where you at?
Pardon?
I said we know time. We Swiss bankers.
I think dropped down. Let me see.
Angela, you're supposed to be backing me up. Oh, the
Yes.
is unstable. Okay, so the nature of tax evasion. I want somebody to tell me in plain language, what's the difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance? Very simple language. Jarrell said tax avoidance is legal and tax evasion is illegal, which is definitely correct. However, there's another, how do I put it? Say something else about it. That's true. One is illegal and one isn't.
Tax. Sorry, tax evasion is that's the well, tax avoidance is when you try to find ways to beat the law, like finding methods or arrangements to minimize your payment of taxes but still within the limits of the law.
Correct. So with tax avoidance, what you do is you see what I would not want to say loopholes, but you see what best fits you and how best the law could work and benefit you. So I'm sure you've heard in all of the US debates, the rich people pay less in taxes because they find all of the things that the average person would not know, obviously because they have tax lawyers and they have accountants working for them to say, well, if you open up a business here, you can, you know, get this tax break, get this tax refund, this thing, write this off and all these other things. So that's purely, that's legal. You could do that. Evasion is when you are trying to not pay what you're supposed to pay to your government. Yes?
Yeah.
There are lots of taxes in part 2 of this. People always say, oh, the Bahamas is a tax haven, y'all don't pay taxes. I tell them, come live here then. Come pay customs, pay VAT, pay real estate, pay the ride on the road. Yes. There are taxes, they're just not outright like some countries because we don't have the income tax. Jarrell said we still evade them. She must see me now because I don't evade taxes. We have law offices and so on this thing. I don't evade taxes, child. I take all of my taxes. But y'all know Bahamians is evade the taxes, right? Y'all know we've been away for 2 weeks.
Customs. Yeah.
And my receipt's coming up to $298.50. And I dare you to tell me otherwise, because you don't know what I carry. And they no tags, tags or nothing. Right? You all know when you sign them customs declaration and you lied, it's a criminal offense. Do you see it on the new declarations?
Yeah, that was always an offense.
That was always an offense.
But it was
Yeah.
it was not always on the forms. It was not always on the forms. Because remember, the forms didn't have as much information a few years ago that it has today. It was an offense, but if you wouldn't tell me it's an offense, then I do what I want to do, right? Just like the traveler's currency, that was enforced for eons. But you know, Bahamians just do it. You carry 6, it's 3 scan. I don't mind if I pay your ticket. You carry 1 4, I can carry 4. The next one will carry 1 2. That's the 10 grand right there, but all belong to me. Right? How much people we didn't see get locked up waiting to catch their flight because they just wait for you to go through. Then they get you. Right? You ain't declare. And I don't understand why people don't declare because the government is taking money. You might as well tell them and you tell them where you get it from and why you're carrying cash. Now, cash obviously isn't as pervasive today as it was back in the, back in the days, because if you get a credit card with a $10,000 limit and you pay it off before you go, you just cross the border. But the act don't speak to credit cards. It talks about currency or the equivalent or cash. So you get a manager's check, right? Or some bonds or something of that nature or cash. Then you declare them. Nobody's declare, oh, my credit card have this limit and I pay it off before I leave. So I have access to X amount of money. Right?
Right.
Right.
I don't know if you always do it, but I don't know nobody was doing it. So some of the taxes listed in section 2, we don't have in the Bahamas. We have the value added tax. And I know we complain a lot about our value added tax, but just so you all know, the value added tax in the UK is 20%. And I pay that gladly every time I go. However, when I'm leaving, all of them things, that's the receipts I keep. All of them receipts, whenever I shop in the UK, I make sure I get the stores to sign off, give them my Bahamian ID, because when you see me get back to Heathrow, I get into their customs and I want my VAT back. I don't know if you can do it in the Bahamas, but you can do it in the US as a process to get your federal taxes back. And I sure you can do it in Canada.
Yeah, you can do it in the US. You just need your passport and that B2, copy of the B2. They either don't charge you or they could give it back to you. They could do either or in the US. A lot of Bahamians don't know that, but you keep your passport on you. You give them a copy of your B2. I do it in purchase cars, purchase parts. They do it all the time.
Yeah. I know if you're shipping as well, like if you go to Brandsmart and you're shipping, you don't pay the taxes.
Right.
Because even the country, obviously they're going to get your passport as well, right?
Yeah.
In Canada, you have the same processes in the UK. When you get to the airport, you can get your federal taxes back, not the county ones, but the federal ones back.
I do that too. I do the same thing, Pareda. When I go to the UK, I just take time. I go early to Heathrow and make sure I get my money back.
Me too, child, Angela, especially with my luxury goods. And I'm
Exactly.
need that 20%. Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah. So for those, when you travel now, you're armed with some new information. Get your money back. You don't live in there, right? We don't have income tax in the Bahamas. We don't have withholding tax. But if you have clients that live in some countries, then sometimes banks are obligated to ensure that if the client isn't compliant, they do withholding of a certain amount. I know at this point, because we're on the French blacklist, any French citizen doing any transaction in the Bahamas, 75% withholding tax, straight across the board, which makes it very difficult for French citizens to do business in the Bahamas, and that's what they want, right? It's prohibitive to pay 75% tax on anything. And if somebody's willing to do that, you have to figure out if that money is really theirs or what the story is with that. Because if you're giving away 75% and you happy to keep 25%, something wrong. I don't know if our tax law is most friendly to any country, considering CRS and FATCA and GATCA. Remember now, for countries that the bigger countries considered to be tax havens, they make it very difficult for their citizens to, I guess, bank in certain countries. But with the advent of FATCA and all this reporting you have to do, I mean, a lot of banks in the Bahamas don't deal with US persons. It's just too much. From a FATCA standpoint, from a reporting, it's just a lot. First it was QI, QJ. You had to deal with that. Then you had to do the withholding for that. Then it's like, you know what? Let's just exit that business because, and it's very litigious. The US legislative regime is very litigious. Unlike the Bahamas where we can try sort things out, we don't just go and sue for everything. So you have to know, okay, well, do I want to deal with a certain country or not? And in the Bahamas, because we've signed on to all of these agreements, ain't really no country you could say go hide from and not pay taxes. They've pretty much leveled that playing field per se.
Yes, because for us at our company, if we take on any new client, they have to be tax compliant in their country. Otherwise, we don't take on the business. They have to be tax compliant.
Yep. Back in the day, Angela, we know they wasn't always like that, right?
I know, but now.
Exactly, things change. Remember the development.
Yes.
The development. So there are different types of tax systems. Before we get to 2.2, it talks about corporation tax. In the Bahamas, we don't have corporate taxes, and there's two sets of people saying maybe we should have and just make it low, and then there's some people that say no. So there's a debate currently going on in financial services world as it relates to corporate taxes. Does anybody here have a side? Should we or should we not as a country? And then if you do have a side, why? I'm trying to expand your mind with this morning.
I don't think we should. The cost of doing business here is already high enough. So to implement a corporate for since to come and do business here, or for those who are here to continue doing business here, or to maintain the level of staffing or what have you. So I don't think it's already too expensive for individuals and businesses already to do business here. Far too expensive.
Try doing business in the UK, Jensen.
Well, I mean, even though they have the 20% VAT, I mean, there's still other factors that kind of offsets that. So the cost of living is still not.
In the UK?
I mean, okay, well, I mean, if you look at the cost of living here and compare it with other countries, I mean, we're very close to the top. I mean, even with the 20% VAT in the UK, the cost of living is still not. I personally don't think it's as high as it is here. Like, I mean, I have a friend who lives in the UK, and based on what they used to live in the Bahamas, based on what they pay for utilities, for housing, etc. I mean, it's still much cheaper than what they would be paying here, and the salaries are still, the scale of the salaries are still much higher. So I mean, yeah, they have certain taxes that may seem unappealing in comparison to other countries. The cost of living, I don't think it's as bad as it is here.
Charles Jensen, you need to tell that to my wallet, because both of my kids went to university in the UK and one is currently there. And I can tell you the cost of living in the UK is prohibitive for the average Bahamian student.
Well, maybe if they're living in London, then
they're living
yes.
in London.
Yes, well, yes, if you're living in London, then yes, absolutely, it's going to be expensive. But I mean, if you're living outside of London, then no, it's not as bad.
I lived in Buckingham, which is like an hour, 2 hours outside of London, and that was pretty high as well. Utilities aren't as bad at all, but rent is still high, especially if you're thinking, you might say the rent is this amount of pounds, but if you can afford it, you feel it. Because I spent at least almost 10,000 some a year just on accommodation.
Shakita, I just paid 24,000 for a little eeny weeny tiny flat, right?
Listen,
a studio for my daughter to live in. I could, for $2,000 a month, she could live in Cable Beach.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it depends. It depends on where you live, but it's very expensive to live in the UK. Food is cheaper. Utilities may be cheaper, but transportation is expensive, right? So the cost of living is high in the Bahamas. I agree. However, I would think that if we introduce corporate taxes from a corporate perspective, we can actually attract business, because the rate doesn't have to be as high as other countries. What say E? Anybody else?
I agree with what you're saying. The corporate tax would be a strain on the industry, but the rate doesn't have to be that high. And then when you look at the deficit, I think it would help to lower the deficit that we're experiencing right now. And it will be much better than implementing income tax, because a lot of people don't have much income at this point. But you have people who have companies that can possibly pay and afford the corporate tax versus income tax. So that's my take on it.
I agree. Give me 1 second. I have to move my vehicle, but y'all can continue the discussion. I will be right back. You can sit here if you need to talk so they can hear you.
Hi, on that note, is this for all companies or certain types of companies? Should the percentage be the same?
Well, it depends. Most companies that are used by foreigners are the IBCs, and most Bahamians use, from what I understand, use what they call the 1992 companies, were mostly operational companies that you would use for maybe a restaurant or a trading business. So I don't know the logistics of actually whether or not whether it'll be fair for them to just apply it to IBCs or particular companies or all corporations, including 1992 companies. But I think it would lift the burden of the government. Given our current state, we need some type of income because our number one industry is failing. So, and we don't know when it's going to be able to generate enough money. And then Bahamians aren't traveling. We already didn't pay. We were just having a discussion about people avoiding their customs duties, and a lot of people aren't shipping and bringing in things as much as they used to because they don't have an income. So I think that's one of the solutions. Now there's other solutions, but I think at present state, that's one of the solutions that could help with the country's deficit versus, and I would prefer that over income tax, because for you to go and pay income tax on what you personally make and you don't make that much, that's a lot. That would be put a strain on families that don't have any jobs at the moment versus a person who could afford to run a corporate business, in particular an IBC, because we have a lot of foreigners that have IBCs here in the Bahamas, and so they tax us when we go to their country. I don't see why we can't tax them, but I understand Jensen's point, because it can make the business look unattractive if you are already paying annual government fees, this fee, that fee, and then they go sit another fee on top to compensate for the corporate tax. But I think at the end of the day, you just have to strike a balance. It's not something that is attractive, but it's something that we may need if we continue to go in the direction we're going by not creating revenue for the country.
Not only that, realistically speaking, and we have to be real here, this is the imposition of taxes is what the European Union countries want countries like the Bahamas to do, because oftentimes you will hear them talk about the blacklisting as a result of AML, CFT, PL deficiencies, but it's really truly boils down to their taxes. They want to be able to extraterritorially tax their citizens. There was an article just recently, I think January 22nd, where the EU member parliament took a vote of, I think think it's 587 to 50, to call for the automatic inclusion on the blacklist of countries who use a 0% tax regime. And they're thinking of doing this after the Brexit deals to the British Crown dependencies and territories, BVI, Guernsey, and Jersey. So when the European Union does this to their former colleague, the UK, they're not going to stop just for Jersey and Guernsey and the territories. They're going to go to all of the offshore jurisdictions. So it's just better behooves us as a jurisdiction to set, like we said before, relatively lower corporate tax. So when they do come calling, when they do come with this automatic inclusion on the blacklist, if we don't have any taxes whatsoever, be corporate or income, that at least we're already ahead of the game and we have a lower tax regime. And also, like Squan said, the coffers are as empty as can be. So if you have a lot of IBCs, well, if you have IBCs here, I would know of a lot, then you might as well get some benefit out of them, because at the end of the day, the Bahamas and other offshore jurisdictions are going to be forced to implement some sort of taxations, because that is what the EU is pushing for.
Yes, I think the corporate tax is worth looking at as well, because I mean, in agreement with what Shari said, I mean, we are in a financial recession or economic recession in our country, and we do need to come up with other ways to generate revenue. And the beauty with the corporate tax structure, if you look at other models around the world, it's only applied when companies are profitable. Well, I know that's the case in the US. So you would be taxing those businesses that are flourishing. And I think it's good for them to have a responsibility to the country that they're in to help them to come out of this, economic recession. But I guess my agreement with corporate tax is twofold, because I think as a country, if we implement any further taxes, we also need to become more transparent in the use of the taxes. I don't think, well, I know I wouldn't mind being taxed if I knew exactly where the money was going and I could see exactly how the country is benefiting from the additional revenue. So if we do pursue corporate taxation, then we also need to have more, well, our transparency levels need to increase. My 2 cents.
Agreed. And not only that,
That's a good point.
we need to apply taxes to those who are best able to afford it. Right now, that's not the case for most behemoth persons. So like we said earlier, if you come up with an income tax, the most behemoths now already burdened with less economic activities, but 12%, yeah, that's probably not going to stay there within the next 2 to 3 years. That's probably going to increase. And all of the other taxes we pay, not named taxes per se, you're going to be tapping a tapped out source. So it's best to take a source that can actually take the hit than those who already tapped out.
Yeah, well, I think those are. Sorry.
Sorry, just to add to that,
Fine.
perhaps they can have a range on the percentage, meaning like, for instance, if a company is the same way that they do with value added tax, if you're making over, I think it's 100,000 a year and more, you have to register and pay the value added tax. So for companies that are generating profits to a certain level or are valued at a certain level should pay a certain amount, and those that are not can almost be exempt from paying a certain amount of corporate tax. So I think if they have an exemption and a bracket in which they're charging it, it'll make it a little bit more feasible.
Yep, agreed. And I think those are some very good arguments for the tax, especially if we're facing the possibility of being blacklisted, as Sam mentioned, in the event, they have all the countries with no corporate tax blacklisted. I mean, that would be disgusting on their part, but at the end of the day, if we want to keep the business of persons from that region, then of course we'll have to implement the tax. And in terms of our financial position now, we could blame COVID or hurricanes, but I think it's really a result of terrible mismanagement of the country's resources by successive governments, wasteful spending, corruption. We could have been in a much better position had the people who, of course, we elected to rule the country had made better decisions or made tough decisions. Like even in the state that we're in now, they're not cutting back on the number of persons we have in the public workforce, even though we don't need probably even half of those. They're not making any cuts because of political reasons. As a result, we continue to have the same fiscal state that we're in. The deficit will continue to grow because none of the parties want to make any tough decisions.
Come, Jansen, you're talking about the government like this. Let's see your face. Let's see your face. Come, Jansen, come. Video on. Video on.
Well, I was on earlier. I was on earlier. I just turned off my video not too long ago.
Okay,
but
great. So
you don't agree with what I'm saying in terms of how not just the president, but previous governments have mismanaged the resources of the country? You don't agree? You don't agree? I wouldn't even say mismanage. I would say abuse.
Jensen, we have officers on this.
Negligence.
Jensen, we get two officers on this. They can get you either coming in or leaving. Jensen, let it go, Jensen.
Their hand is in the cookie jar.
Miss Sands, truth doesn't need a defense. If he's speaking the truth, then he doesn't have to defend that.
Is it truthful or is it factual? But anyway, we ain't going on that road. Mr. Ferguson, don't start.
I think it's both, but yes, we can leave it.
So thank you all for the discussion. Jensen, so you see how the argument can go both ways, right?
Absolutely. And some on the call have made some strong arguments for it. Let's see where the debate goes. But yeah, definitely good arguments for and against. Good.
Thank you, Jensen. Introduction to conflict of revenue laws. I think we talked about that already. As you should know, the Bahamas does have a residency. You purchase a home or whatever it is, and you get Bahamian residence, permanent residence. So residence and then domicile are two terms that go hand in hand as it relates to tax, because all of the acts that govern the tax regime are either because you're a resident or because you're domiciled. And so there's a kind of difference between residing and being domiciled, because you could be a tax resident in a country which you're not domiciled. The US have specific rules as it relates to residency. For all y'all who like to go to America and spend more than 3 months, if you do it consecutively for 3 years, just know you could be considered a US person, okay? For all of those who are not in financial services, that is, who may not know about the rules as it relates to how many days you have been in the US, for whatever reason, it don't matter. Okay? So there's a formula that the tax man uses to calculate whether or not you should be paying taxes in the US, because after a certain, I think it's 180 days, 182 days, in a 3-year consecutive, in 3 consecutive years, you are considered, or you can be considered, a US person. So if you're like me, it's kind of much days you go and how long you stay, and you don't really overnight, just, you go through and then you come back just to make sure. You have a question? Okay. Yeah, body tell you stay in the country for all them days. Yes. That on you if you decide you want to be there for all them days. So yes, you can. I mean, and I don't know if they actually do it, but they have their laws give them the ability to do it. So residency of companies, normally you're resident with the companies incorporated, but that can be transferred. Anybody who is in the corporate world knows that you can transfer the domicile, the residency of a company. Also, based on CESRA, ain't nobody talk about that act this morning, but does anybody know what CESRA means?
No. Says it, no.
Commercial economic substance.
Start over. Where my bankers? You all here to do CESRA.
Commercial Economic Substance Reporting Act.
Commercial entities?
Is the entities. Commercial Entities Substance Requirements Act.
Right.
So that is a law that speaks to corporate entities that does specific types of businesses from the Bahamas. And it even includes Bahamian companies. So if you're a commercial entity doing business from the Bahamas and you are doing what they consider to be included activities, like a bank or a trust company or securities firm, you have to be able to show a couple of things. One of the things is that you have the mind and management of that company situated in the Bahamas where you're incorporated. You also have to show that you have a physical presence, which means you have to have an office, and you have to have employees. Yes, because we had a lot of what they used to term shell companies or things of that nature where you just have a company, but incorporated in the Bahamas, but you're sitting in another country around the world and it's conducting commercial business, right? So CESRA seeks to level the playing field, obviously based on, I think it was either EU or OECD recommendations as it relates to companies just saying, oh, we resident in the Bahamas or we domicile in the Bahamas, so they don't want to pay the taxes in their home jurisdiction. We are on page 120 for me, which is unit 4, but we're on 2.3.1 jurisdiction, because this is how we're talking about domicile and residence. That's how countries determine how to impose taxes, right? And so I get to CESRA because here, if you can prove that you're doing business here, right? And you have physical presence here, your staff is here, your mind and management of the company is here, then you domicile and resident in the Bahamas, you shouldn't have to pay taxes in another jurisdiction where you may have a subsidiary or an affiliate company. Yes? Yeah. Right. They have double taxation. I'm not sure if the Bahamas has double taxation treaty signed with any countries, but I know if we were to go into the corporate taxation world, we should have this in place prior to doing that. Because if we do not have double taxation agreements in place, it would make absolutely no sense for people to do business here. Typical onshore anti-tax avoidance provision. It talks about cross-border payments of investment income. It talks about, there's a classical system, how you determine where the companies are, where they should pay taxes. It also talks about the profits, how the profits should be computed. And I don't know if you guys know, but when you're dealing with companies that are subsidiaries of companies, I know for sure, banks that are headquartered in the UK or the EU, Switzerland, at the end of every year, once you would have made a profit, for the most part, that gets sent repatriated. It goes back to what I determine your mother company, and then they determine how much, you have to use for budget the following year, how much you use for bonus pool and operational expenses and the likes. Angela, you could give us, I know you're a CFO, you can give us any little tidbits, not specifically from your company. How does that work? Because I know it works in Swiss institutions for sure.
Yes, every 2 years we pay a dividend. We pay a dividend to the parent company. It's not taxed, but of course, we're regulated by the central bank, so we have the approval to pay out dividends.
Y'all get that?
Okay. This is under the classical taxing system.
Pardon?
It's not a tax. That's just how it's set up.
Yes, that's how it's set up.
Because remember, that's your home, that's
company.
your home office. That's
Right.
your parent company.
So we repatriate funds, but we call them dividends, to our parent company. Our parent company say, well, we need to pay our shareholders. And so we need to pay our shareholders. So definitely we need to declare dividends. So we pay the dividend to the parent company.
The company would then be subject to taxes in their own country. Based
Exactly, not right. So when we repatriate the fund, not subject to tax.
Okay. You're saying not subject to tax?
No, it's not tax when we repatriate the funds to the parent company.
Everybody clear on that? Any questions? Okay. The Control Foreign Company Anti-Tax Avoidance Rule, obviously there's rules as it relates to tax. I may call on Angela again because she is the figures woman that I could count on. And then it talks about transfer pricing, the diversion of profits and offshore company. I know plenty, I don't know if you guys would know, even though Apple is an American company, you know where Apple head office is? Does anybody know?
China?
Nope.
Yeah, I know. Like Ireland or somewhere in the UK.
It's in Ireland.
It is.
Wow.
So because they're technically, right, in Ireland, and Ireland obviously taxation system is different from the US. This is one of the reasons why CESRA and BEPS, that's another law. It's an initiative, I should say, came into play because major corporations don't have their corporate structure in the US. So Apple making trillions of dollars or how much ever they make, but because they're headquartered in Ireland, then they're not subject to the US taxation. And so there's an initiative that's been going on for the last couple of years. It's called BEPS. I think it is base erosion profit shifting, because corporations shift money as they deem necessary to avoid the payment of taxes in higher tax brackets, right? And so that's another reason, Jensen, I was saying, let's have the discussion about corporate taxes, because Ireland is a low tax jurisdiction. So while Ireland may be, let's just say 5%, the US may be 30-40%. So yeah, they're paying corporate taxes, but they saving 28-30% based on what it is. And so your savings between paying it in a lower jurisdiction or a lower tax bracket is worth it to headquarter your company somewhere else. Because even with all your operational expenses, 38% is a whole lot of money to save. Yes?
Agreed.
Right. So y'all look up Apple because it's like the example that everybody uses as it relates to shifting corporate taxes to offshore countries. So let's try speed it up a little. It talks about disclosure requirements to identify tax evaders. As we all know, the US is big on this. US anti-tax avoidance disclosures under the QI. Remember, I talked about the QI/QJ regime and FATCA. FATCA is a rule that the US implemented that everybody around the world had to implement if you want to be in their good books. Pretty much they made all countries to be their tax either collectors or to ensure that their citizens are tax compliant. You do not want to fall afoul of the IRS. No shape, form, nothing, none of that. Right? So FATCA was one of those laws that changed the game in financial services. And it's extraterritorial. Because pretty much if you do not abide by FATCA, you cannot use the US dollar. Simple. So it talks about the QI rules, right? Qualified intermediaries. This is more towards like the securities industry, but you have to be able to ensure that when income is derived, there's a specific way on which it should be distributed, right? You also have to know the beneficial owner. You have to know how private companies operate and how they're treated as nominee companies, and also private companies that are owned by offshore trusts and trustees. You have to be able to disclose the offshore service provider, like a corporate and financial service provider, or registered office and agent type business. And you have to also know if you're going to be a qualified intermediary, what you should and shouldn't be doing, and also what the obligations of non-qualified intermediaries are. FATCA, like I said, is a huge deal. FATCA is a law unto itself. Please, when you have an opportunity, look it up. It has changed the way financial institutions around the world conduct business. And what I find very peculiar about the law is it is in one direction. It is not reciprocal. So the US mandates that you do it, but they don't do it for you. Isn't that interesting?
It's not fair.
Very.
Let's not talk about fair. Remember we discussed fair last week? If you're in banking and finance, fair is not a word that comes into play very often. That's when you have to deal with a US person, and I didn't say a US citizen or US national, because you could be a US person in more than one way. Like I said to you earlier, you have to ensure that that US person is properly identified. You could be a US person, not even know it, because you have a US, what they consider to be a US nexus. And for all of y'all who have US phone numbers, US bank accounts, US mailing addresses or US physical addresses, just know if it's not a forwarding or a courier service, you could be considered a US person. And it's 183 days to meet the substantial presence test. You guys see that? Under KYC identification and the FATCA, that was what I was trying to remember earlier. There are lots of ways you could be a US person. So just keep that in mind. I mean, I know with the advent of the pandemic, a lot of us have kind of curbed our travel, but plenty of us like to go to America because it's like 30 minutes away. And we don't consider all of these weekends we spend in there consecutively, consistently. When you're dealing with taxes, you have to reconsider the way you travel and the length of time you stay. And if you are considered, they can come after your income tax. If you are considered, they can come after whatever they won't come after, even though you technically are Bahamian. For all of those who either have children or thinking about having children in the US, it's not all about the free education. Think about you subjecting your child to payment of taxes on your worldwide income. I know a lot of Bahamians, especially from the islands in the north, they go to America to have their kids and they think, oh, they're going to have a better life, or they're going to have a US passport, or they should be able to go to school, university cheaper. That's all fine and good for the near term, but for the future, unless that child denounces their US citizenship, they're going to be taxed on their global income. And if your child is destined to be wealthy, they're going to either have to, give up, denounce that citizenship, or be taxed. And it'll be something for them to denounce the citizenship that you tried so hard for them to have, right? Yes? Y'all gone quiet, y'all tired, eh?
No, we right there listening.
Okay. Do y'all know that? Does it make sense what I'm saying to you guys?
Yes.
Yes, because is what you're referring to is what they call US indicia?
Yes,
Like
indicia. US indicia.
mm. So
So
which
there,
means, because I know when we did FATCA reporting, you don't have to have a US passport to be reportable. You could even own a company, and your company could be deemed a US reportable account if it's been if it owns real estate
in the US.
or if the person who owns real estate in the US or has an address that they frequent.
Yep. Yep. Totally agree. There are reporting measures and disclosures on the FATCA that you will have to be familiar with. The UK's son of FATCA look-alike IGAs. They are intergovernmental agreements. We call it GATCA. It's similar to the US FATCA model that the UK came out with afterwards. But they're all extraterritorial. And as you know, the UK also has countries in the Caribbean that are either crown dependents or overseas territories, right? So crown dependents of the UK, Jersey, Guernsey, Isle of Man, the overseas territories, Cayman, Gibraltar, Montserrat, Bermuda, Turks and Caicos, BVI, Anguilla. And then it says Switzerland. But they are all countries, they have agreements, IGAs with the UK. Same thing, tax reporting. Then I think we talked earlier about CRS, OECD Common Reporting Standards. Common Reporting Standards is where I get the CRS from, and it's an automatic multilateral tax information sharing intergovernmental agreement. So you can't really duck it. You don't think you can come to the Bahamas to hide your money, because we're reporting to everybody. Yes. And like Angela said, in the last couple of years, if you're in tax compliant in your home jurisdiction, you can forget it. Don't come. Because we're not going to even entertain the thought of you being a customer in the Bahamas. Yes. So I don't know if you guys remember a couple of years ago, we had said that we were going to do bilaterals. We didn't want to take the multilateral approach. Anybody remember that story?
Yes. Eventually, we were forced to do the multilateral.
That's it.
Yes, yes.
And it was a huge deal for us because we were saying, okay, we should be able to choose as a country, the countries with which we would like to do these IGAs with, right? Child, something gone wrong. And all of a sudden it was, you all either do this or this will happen. So as opposed to allowing this to happen, the government quickly changed their position and determined to just do multilateral. That way it kind of kept us off of a list. I don't know if it's going to be a black list, a gray list, or a white list, but we were threatened with being included on a list. And so the position was changed rather quickly, and we agreed to doing the multilateral approach. All of these things fall under compliance, just so you all know it. So when you all get into the industry and they start talking about BEPS and FATCA and CRS and all that, you are going to be involved in it because this would come under regulatory compliance. Yes? And that's why it's included in the book. Now you may think, well, Charla, I know tax person. Well, you better go to BIF, so you better find a tax course so you can familiarize yourself with at least the bare minimum so you can know exactly what your responsibility is. Because if you're going to be the responsible person as it relates to filing these reports, you don't want to be the responsible person with the IRS and you submit the wrong thing. Yes? Anybody say nothing? There are consequences for lying to the US government.
Yes.
For me who like travel, I can't afford to get put on no kind of blacklist, no fly list, no nothing. So I need to make sure whatever it is that I'm going to be responsible for, because FATCA has a dedicated responsible person that the IRS would know about, even though we don't report directly to the IRS because we chose the model where we report to our own government and then they report, because we have a competent authority. Our competent authority know who we are. And if the IRS come to them, they come to us. Yes? So we need to make sure that you are aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And if you're not comfortable, speak out. Do not let any organization throw a title on you and throw a responsibility on you that you're not comfortable with. Because as the money laundering reporting officer in law, not only in regulations, not only in guidance, in law, you have personal liability, which means Foxville could be your home one day. And I mean Foxville prison, and I mean Foxville community. That's how serious the MLRO position is. And that's why in law, it's described as somebody who's senior, independent, can make analytical decisions, all of these things. So don't allow organizations to say, oh, use my MLRO. Oh, hold on, wait. Somebody was supposed to tell me if they're the MLRO. Speaking of this from last week. Who attorney that was?
It was me. I'm not.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you breezed past that one. Good. That's a good thing, eh? Because the personal liability that comes along with it, I'm not sure that everybody that's an MLRO is aware of it. Okay, so you have to ensure that you know what you're signing up for. And if you don't feel like you're ready or you don't feel capable, and if they're forcing it on you, then you need to ask for training, just so that you can be confident enough that you can carry out the duties that are specified in law. This ain't no what the central bank say. This the FTRA say, this the FIU expects. Yes? Criminal liability for laundering the proceeds of tax evasion. Obviously, we know that there's liability. Before the Proceeds of Crime Act was amended in 2018, tax evasion was not a predicate offense. Check it out now. It's a predicate offense because obviously, because we didn't do corporate taxes in the Bahamas and things of that nature, it wasn't a predicate offense because as far as we're concerned, we ain't worrying about your taxes, that's for y'all to collect. Not so today, right? Tax evasion is now a predicate offense under POCA in the Bahamas. So just ensure that you have no dealings with assisting any clients in evading their taxes. And you let their attorneys help them in the avoidance procedures as it relates. Their attorneys and their accountants, obviously, they would know how to get around and maneuver around some of the tax loopholes or beneficial tax clauses for them. So it talks about criminal liability for laundering the process of foreign tax evasion. They're all criminal liability. It's a crime. Tax evasion is a crime pretty much anywhere around the world, unless you live in a banana republic. So just ensure that you as a compliance person or somebody that's trying to get into the field know what it is that you're expected to do and to know, so that you won't allow your organization to be used by any clients to launder money through tax evasion. Yes. Customer due diligence is important on all aspects, whether it be tax, whether it be just normal banking, whether it be insurance. you have a duty to know all of the information about the client with which you are preparing to do business with, the client with which you are doing business with, or the client that you have ceased to do business with. There's an obligation and a duty owed to the regulator for you to know the information. Do your due diligence. For persons in different sectors like PEPs, politically exposed persons, for persons from high-risk countries, for high-risk individuals, there's another measure in addition to just the regular customer due diligence. It's called enhanced due diligence. So you have to go a step further to ensure that you know even more information when you're dealing with those specific types of clients. Now in the Bahamas, everybody could be a PEP, if the truth be told, right? Because everybody uncle or cousin or something in politics or in one government organization high up or something like that, right? So a lot of us PEPs, we ain't saying we PEPs, but we PEPs, right? Because the Bahamas is obviously a small country, but from a national perspective, there are some organizations, some banks that they give you a really hard time when you are a PEP, and rightfully so. And you could be a PEP just by being a family member. You could be a PEP by being a close associate. You know, people like to hang out with these people in politics and they like to be seen with them. Not me. You could be my friend, undercover buddy. Because you don't go across my bank account, get blocked up on air for you. Right? Because obviously they're higher risk. And as Jensen said earlier, when it relates to corruption, the Bahamas is pretty much high on the transparency index, right? So if we're kind of in the middle of the bunch, that means we're, you know, we have the perception, because it's a perception index, that we can be considered a fairly corrupt country as it relates to politics. So even though we all know our politicians, we're familiar with them, we probably family with them, please be minded of this in your daily life, okay? Not because you know the prime minister, that's your cousin, your uncle, whatever. Yeah, you need to be careful, not only from a political standpoint though, just from your banking. It affects everything you do because, you know, Pepsi ain't just the person. It's their family, it's their close relative. It could be their close friends. Once you are in that inner circle or deemed to be in that inner circle, then you could be considered a PEP. Yes, and once you're considered a PEP, then enhanced due diligence is mandatory. So just keep that in the back of your minds. I know we go in the Bahamas, sometimes we like to name drop and sometimes we like to, you know, be seen with this one and that one. I'm pretty much the opposite in my personal life. You ain't gonna, I mean, you can know I know some people, but you ain't gonna see me out with them. I'm gonna talk to them on the phone or I'm gonna go to their house. Because of that same thing I just said. I don't need to be being under enhanced scrutiny for no reason other than a reason I myself would want to be. Yes? So it has learning incomes and it has tasks. So the learning income outcome, sorry, you should understand when and in what circumstances an individual who resides onshore for tax purposes is liable to pay taxes, including the significance of residence and place of incorporation in determining where taxes due. Do you understand that? Based on our conversation about, you know, where companies incorporated, where people live, where they're domiciled. Is there anybody who is unclear on how that works? Come on, people. Man, it's ain't 12 o'clock. Y'all ain't answering me today?
We get it.
You get it? Okay. I just want to make sure, because when we go to the next chapter, I want y'all to say, oh, we just breeze through and we ain't sure what is what. Okay. You have to appreciate the effects of classical and imputation methods of assessing tax. We talked about the US legislation, FATCA, and the QI system on US and non-US financial services business. We talked about the OECD's CRS, Common Reporting Standards, that all of us in the Bahamas in banking have had to deal with. And we have to understand the criminal liability under all of this, speaks to their acts, but under the acts in the Bahamas as it relates to banks, trustees, and service providers who receive, manage, invest, and or transfer the proceeds of tax evasion. Under POCA, all of them could be guilty. So The task says to conduct a review of local predicate offense laws. You go to POCA for this to see what the offenses are and whether tax evasion is recognized as a predicate crime for the purposes of money laundering. In POCA 2018, it is. Compare and contrast the rules with those of overseas jurisdictions such as the US, Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai. Hong Kong and Singapore are based on the British model, so they're going to be similar to what we're talking about from the UK. Dubai is a Muslim country, so their rules are completely different. And the US is a different kettle of fish altogether. And then you could conduct a review of the OECD forum on transparency and exchange information for tax purposes, which can be found, and they give you the website. So you can do those tasks if you have an opportunity this week. Any questions before we move to the vulnerabilities of products and services? Pardon?
I didn't hear you. I lost connection a minute.
Oh, I said if there are any questions before we move to Unit 5, because we have to cover Unit 5 before we leave today.
Go ahead.
All right.
Everyone's good?
Good so far.
Okay.
Yes, good.
All right, so Unit 5, did anybody get a chance to read or look at Unit 5? Is this a big chapter?
I ain't this yet.
Only the first 10 pages.
It is, yeah.
The first 10 pages of what, Unit 5, or the first 10 pages of Unit 3?
Unit 5. This is a big one, the over 100 pages.
Yeah, Unit 5 is a big chapter.
I haven't gotten to it either.
Okay. So, and the learner objective for this unit is to provide an understanding of the various vulnerabilities that entities have through their specific products and services, consider how these vulnerabilities can be mitigated, and explain how the laws on money laundering and terrorist financing apply to non-financial professionals whose work nonetheless brings them into contact with the financial service industries. Remember the DNFPB she talked about earlier? That's that group, okay?
Okay.
So when examining, I'm going to read this little piece here because I think it's important. When examining the vulnerabilities of different products and services, it is essential that the MLRO bears in mind the overriding objective of the money laundering process, namely to disguise the source of property so that it cannot be linked to the original crime, i.e. the predicate offense. In order to fulfill this primary objective, launderers may first seek to achieve a number of secondary laundering objectives, including concealing the fact that they own the property, concealing the fact that they may manage and control the property, and placing as much distance as possible between themselves and the property, both physically and on paper. So we live in the Bahamas. Y'all tell me how y'all think either of those 3 points can be achieved just using examples from the Bahamas. Jarrell said we can have front businesses, yes.
You can put your properties in like your mommy name or someone else's name.
Yep.
Yes. What else? That's a common one, Omar.
Some persons, they set up a company and put the property in the company's name, under the company.
Right, which is completely legitimate, but okay. But why would you do that for an illegitimate reason? Which it can be done. I'm not saying it can't be done for an illegitimate reason. Why would you do it for an illegitimate reason?
So if anything happens to you, that property would be off limits because it's under the company's name.
Well, I mean, that's generally the whole reason of putting stuff in a company anyway, but what else from an illegal perspective? Legally, that's what you want. You want to separate your personal assets from other assets, and the best way to do it is to put it in a company. Purely legal, straight. But from an illegal perspective, remember this, the three of these, well, the first two talks about concealing.
Yeah,
So if you're concealing, it's illegal, right? What were you saying, Omar? Sorry.
I was trying to assist in direct explanation, whereas you said conceal. I was thinking you could disguise the origin of the original of the property by putting it in the company's name, right, to make it appear as though the company was able to amass whatever these properties are.
Okay. But how are you going to do that in a company?
I was thinking in terms of the company, you could put someone else as the figurehead of your company, whereas you are the origin of the funds.
Right. And that's all fine and good when you're incorporating, but remember now in the Bahamas, we have the new Beneficial Owners Act. Remember that? You guys are familiar with that?
Yeah, so if you are, even if you have a nominee shareholder, you still have to report who is the ultimate beneficial owner.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's since 2018.
Correct.
What the ultimate beneficial?
I think just recently they passed a Transparency Corporate Act in the US.
And still you could do certain things in different states because remember now, not all the acts in the US are federal.
No.
Right? So some states like Nevada and Miami and Delaware, you can still do a lot of things that you can't do in the Bahamas as it relates to corporations and LLCs. Yes?
Yes.
Pardon?
Wyoming, North Dakota. Now this is adding Wyoming and North Dakota.
Correct.
I think that's a popular structure in trust businesses. I notice a lot of trusts that are established. They have underlying companies, and then those companies will own the membership of LLCs in those particular states.
You're talking about domestic trust, US trust? What trust you talking about? Because that's just how trusts work. It's very hard for a trust to just own assets outright. Only certain countries allow that.
But that's legitimate. You can do that.
Right. And that's why I'm saying, how can it be used illegitimately? Come on, people.
If you have a illegal source of generating revenue and you want to disguise how that revenue is generated, then you would do that. I mean,
Yeah, you can do that, but okay. Let's remember Omar talked about putting in your mommy's name, right? You could find the ultimate beneficial owner and it still don't have to be their money. Yes? Because they can get the money from somebody else, but still ultimately beneficially own the corporate structure. It's where they get their money from that the concealment takes place. Because if you already own a business, it's very easy to conceal and to what they call commingle assets. How much fishing men we have in this country who we all know this fish and deal drugs. How you could tell me how much fish I catch and what I sell and how much lobster I sell and the likes? Ain't no way for nobody to really know that. But while I out to sea, I doing some other things. Yes?
Yeah.
So I do have a legitimate business. I'm just commingling. So in honesty, my fishing only bringing in 100,000. Well, actually, lobster seamen, they make good money, right? Fishermen can really make good money. But then if I get that little drugs on the side, I'm making good money plus. Yes? So you can concealing the source from one end, even though it's a legitimate business.
Okay.
Right? And if I want to put it in my name, I can put it in my name because everybody know I own a fish house. How you could tell me what my fish house bringing in? There's no way for you to determine that. Entrepreneurs are in a position with which they can do this by years, concealing and commingling. Right?
Right.
Layering is once they get it into the financial organization. But you could commingle, because I drive taxi, but I do other things too. And we Bahamians go, let's get something little something on the side. Because that's how our parents bring us up for the most part, right? You're gonna be in my house being lazy. So guess what? You start making lemonade to sell. If you could cook good, you start baking to sell, but you still got your big daytime job. And sometimes your side hustle bringing in more than your daytime job. And it's a legal side hustle. But if you just throw one illegal activity in there, you get 2 or 3 legal hustles. You get that one illegal hustle. Ain't nobody can tell you different. How many car sales we pass and say, well, motorcycle cars make money? Because it's like 1 million of them in the Bahamas, right? But you don't know. We always think, boy, they front. How much car washing in Nassau? How you survive on just washing 3 cars a day? Right? So all of these things you have to think about. And I'm not saying that you can't make an honest living from doing it, because you can. But when you think about the demographics and the population, some things just don't make sense. But that ain't for me to figure out. That's for the law enforcement people to figure out, right? And the bankers.
Right.
But from a retail banking perspective, it is up to the banks to determine, based on the profile that they would have created for you, based on the form that you filled out and the information that you gave them, and based on the transaction monitoring system that they have in place, and all of the transactions that stand outside of your profile, that's for them to figure out. Churches come under the NPO Act, and they make noise with that for almost 2 years. That just came into effect. Y'all remember how much hullabaloo last year it was, coming up to the end of last year, when the banks were mandated to block the accounts of charities under which the church fall? Y'all remember that? I mean, it was COVID, but y'all should have.
Yes.
It wasn't an issue.
Pardon?
Yeah, a lot of these churches, they make a lot of money, but but prior to that, they didn't account for it, the funds, and anybody could come and donate a tithe.
No, it's a seed, sweetie. You gotta get it right. You donate a seed. You repay the tithes. Yeah. Because the members do the tithes, but anybody could give the offering. Yes?
Yes.
So they fall under the NPO Act, charities, right? Non-profits.
Yep.
Plenty money is run through non-profits. If you think about it, I think in the first class we talked about how was terrorism. Right. Now, we don't think about terrorist financing in the Bahamas because, first of all, we be thinking ain't no terrorist could be able to get us because we ain't never on time for nothing. So when they say, okay, we can blow up something at 8:02, as Bahamians, we just reach at 8:15. So only them dead because at 8:02 they detonate, but nobody was there. Right? I mean, when you think about the Bahamas, you don't think terrorist financing.
But we've had local examples of terrorism, though.
Pardon?
We've had local examples of terrorism, depending on, I guess. We spoke about this in our intermediate class, that Fox Hill massacre that took place a few years back, that was labeled as domestic terrorism, and also a situation that had happened in Montel Heights at a shower or something like that. That was also labeled as domestic terrorism.
You know why? Can you guess why?
Because of the amount of individuals who were injured.
One, and what else?
And gang related, possibly.
No, if you were deemed a terrorist, ain't no coming out of jail for you. That one over. Ain't no appeal. It's the penalty that accompanies terrorism. That is why certain charges are filed.
Right.
But look it up. Go see what the penalties are for conviction of terrorism. The harshest penalty you could get.
All right, I'll check that out.
Go look it up. Right. And then also I had my class, I think like 2 years ago, we sat and we talked about I in BIFs now, right? I'm literally physically in BIFs. Y'all see how easy it is to pull up by the wharf? Yeah, they have the fence there, right? Yeah, they have defense force or police or whoever officers they have there. Let's just say, yes, a cruise ship in harbor. How easy are we? We're sitting ducks in the Caribbean as it relates to tourism and the cruise industry for terrorist attacks. Y'all see where the Hilton is? Y'all see where Margaritaville is and the Point? What stands between you and a cruise ship? Water? In terms of distance. Not only the Bahamas, I've been to plenty Caribbean countries and stayed on cruise ships. And I think if I had a rock, I could throw it and hit the building I'm supposed to go in, which is the terminal. What stops us from having a terrorist event? I'm not sure we as Bahamians take terrorism, one, as seriously as we should. And two, I'm not sure if we are as prepared as we need to be as it relates to our borders. The defense was supposed to be out there. Mr. Ferguson, the lady in the class said the defense was supposed to be out there.
A lot of what you say is correct. I don't know if we I don't want to get into political, because everything in this country.
No. We're only discussing what we can see.
Let me just say generally, we obviously could do better, way better, far better. So I'm gonna say that.
Right. I blame him, child. That's the demand is weak. See, I blame him. I'm just saying it from when you're looking at in the country, things that can happen and then things that relate to banking. Because when people come off the ship, now I have friends, when the cruise industry was in the heyday, we go to Miami, we buy all our things and we roll them off when we come to the port. Because what stops us from bringing all our things and taking it home duty free? Nothing. Think about it. That's just evading customs, which is evading taxes, which is a criminal offense. I'm just saying, I'm just trying to bring it home. Yes?
Yeah.
We do, I mean, I have not done it simply because I just ain't trying to come to the Bahamas on a cruise, right? But I know I've had friends that they purpose that the second or the first stop on their itinerary is the Bahamas. They go and they show up overnight. They get everything that they want. Everybody in the family party, they roll their bags off. Leave their things home and bring back the empty suitcase. That's tax evasion. It's an offense. And people will say, okay, you're very smart to do that and whatever. I'm just saying, right? It's the same thing for terrorists. We have to think outside of the box as it relates to how these things can happen. Because as a banker, anybody can never know you evaded taxes if you do it that way. Think about it. Who out there in customs could stop you? You coming off a ship. You have your ID, your ship card around your neck or whatever it is. You rolling stuff, because a lot of times tourists bring their suitcases to buy goods, you know what I mean? Souvenirs and stuff. So nobody stops you at the port of entry once you're on a cruise ship.
I have a question related to terrorism. I'm sorry, what we're speaking of, just a little bit broader perspective. What, if any, liability would there be for the Bahamas? Because a lot of these, if a terrorist activity takes place, especially if it's U.S.-related citizens, they like to sue through all avenues. So let's say we have a Bahamas flag cruise ship, and a terrorist activity happens on that ship. What, if any, liability is there to the Bahamas in these Americans or other citizens' abilities to, they sue everybody. So let's say they get down to, okay, well, this happened on a Bahamian branded ship. We're gonna sue the Bahamas per se.
Well, I don't know if you could necessarily sue the country from which the ship flag is tied to or registered to. But you have to think about, you may have a Bahamian vessel, right? However, it may be an American company. Everybody know Norwegian or Carnival or whatever, they fly the Bahamas flag because there are advantages to having their ships registered here from a maritime perspective, especially if it's a fleet of ships that the Caribbean is their base, right?
Right.
That will depend on the level of the event, because obviously anything involving a U.S. citizen, America is going to be involved. So you can imagine a boat, a ship full of U.S. people or whatever it is, right? So that would depend. And obviously there are laws that govern maritime, and
Right.
there are going to be bilateral laws as it relates to what each country should be responsible for and the level at which they would, I guess, come together to see what has to happen. So when you're talking about just ships and the flags and, it also depends on where the event happens.
Right.
Because where the event happens also would determine who has the right to investigate it. Yes? So all of those things would be factors. But from a banking perspective, like I said, someone have to be benefiting. You ain't just, and apart from the people who just terrorists because it, whatever practices. Someone benefiting. When you think about human smuggling and trafficking, the money going somewhere. So from an AML and compliance perspective, that is where we need to think. Who is getting the money, how they getting the money, and why? And then that is how we work with the FIU through STRs, and they work with law enforcement to kind of stop that, right? Because when you think about, we talking about retail banking services, everybody got a savings account because you got to get paid, or a checking account, right? But you could use those accounts to do pretty much anything you want to do in terms of vulnerabilities. Remember, we're talking about vulnerabilities. How easy is it for you to use your bank account? You get on, you have a debit card attached to your bank account, and you want to support terrorism in Iran, Iraq, or wherever they are. All you do is donate online. Bang, just like that, right?
Yeah.
I know back in the day when I worked in retail bank, we didn't ask the clients what they had in their safety deposit box. Two of us accompanied them to open their box, and they go in their little room and they take out and put in whatever they felt like. Yes? Very vulnerable. It's a very vulnerable product. Yes?
Okay.
Wire transfers. Now, they have so much rules around wire transfers now. It's very difficult to get a wire transfer to be executed if something ain't right with it, because you can't strip no information. You have to have all of the information. If not, it bouncing back. Yes?
Okay.
So it's not as easy. And the product itself, the wire transfer product, is not as vulnerable, in my opinion, to a safety deposit box or savings account. Because when you're home, 1 o'clock in the night, you can do anything with your money online. And now the bank's allowing you to transfer from one person to the next. Easy. Click, 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 done. Right?
Yeah.
So it's
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
I was in AML training, and one of the examples the facilitator gave was, and can you expand on this to clear this up a little bit for me, please? You have a child abroad at school, and the child needs money, and you send the child the money, and you've been doing this over the period of the child being in school, and then you find out that the money that you were sending him to pay the child their tuition and their living accommodation, they got involved in some terrorist group, and they're using that money to assist that group. And now you are held accountable. Is that so? Something like that?
No, because two things: the mens rea is in there and the actus rea is in there. Because you know that you have a child, you have an obligation to take care of that child, right? So the mens rea from you is parent to child relationship. I'm supporting my child financially because they, most times, even if they work in Berlin University, they ain't making a bunch of money, right? So I'm supporting my child financially. So from a mens rea perspective, a mental perspective, I am being a good parent. From an act perspective, your child, right, is committing the act, but the two of them isn't in the same person, right? Your child thought about taking the money their parents sending them, so they committing, right, the mens rea and the actus rea, because they know the money to pay rent. That's why, like me, you don't give to them to pay the rent, you pay the school the rent, or you pay the rent to the people. This thing go with sense. Anyway, and so that child is held accountable because it's not like you're just sending the money willy-nilly. You have an obligation because when they would have gotten their visas, you probably was the person signing for it, right? You are the person that's saying, I'm going to ensure that this thing gets done. So no, you cannot be held unless, of course, you are aware of what they were doing. And it's going to be difficult for anyone to prove that you were aware if you were not aware.
Okay, on the flip side then, what if I obtain the money illegal and use it to support my child away? Would the child be responsible as well?
No, because the child, as a parent, my daughter ain't never once asked me, Mommy, you get this money legally? Ever. And it's a 50 in the UK. Never, ever, ever, ever. She pretty much don't care where the money come from what she knows I have a job, right? And her school fee getting paid, her accommodation getting paid, her transportation getting paid. There's an expectation that you have a job, you working.
Okay.
So, you know, either side, it has to be both the mens rea and the actus rea. Rea, so whatever the Latin terminology is.
Okay, thank you.
So you have to recognize that.
Wow.
Pardon? Someone saying something?
No, I just said wow to the whole thing that she shared. Just thinking about it.
Yeah, and you have to think, remember now, a lot of times when kids go off to school, back in the day, we used to wire the money. When my daughter came home after a bachelor's, I said, this just too, you costing me too much money, sweetie. What we could do is you could open up an account where I have an account and I could go online and I could just send you this money because I am not going to the bank every time you need something. You see how easy it is?
Yeah.
So I simply do a bank to bank, a customer to customer transaction online. If it's 30 seconds it take me, I'm here, she in the UK, she have her money. Imagine me doing that to a terrorist organization. Obviously the terrorist organization account ain't gonna say terrorist organization account, right? It's going to appear legitimate. So that's just how easy it is and how vulnerable that product is to AML, CFT, PF, right? Very easy. Buying drafts and checks. Even with buying drafts and checks, normally the buying draft and checks isn't as vulnerable because where the money coming from, there has to be some KYC. And then when you're going to cash a check, there has to be some KYC, right?
Right.
And in this country, these banks, if the check's more than $3,000, they ain't cashing it for you. Deposit it. They ain't giving you that kind of money. Even though I don't understand that, but a lot of banks have taken that on as a procedure, a policy, which don't really make sense because if I have a checking account and the money in the account, why you tell the person the check written to, they can't cash the check. I don't get that. But that's been my experience recently. Banks have taken this cash check into a whole different level. They prefer for you to go to your bank and deposit the check, wait the 2 or 3 days it takes to clear for you to have access to the money, which I don't understand why we even have checking accounts no more in this country. But obviously, more companies have checking accounts because that's a way for them to keep records, right?
Yeah.
So you can use bank accounts for good and bad, right? Bank accounts for legal entities, like companies, like I said, they can set them up They could have all of the things that are necessary, and they still could be doing illegal things with it. It depends on what they want to do, what the intent is, right? Because you could have a company and you could know full well your client shady, but not your whole book of business, just one or two of them, but guess what, that one or two paying the additional fees. Yes. And so you say, okay, I don't mind conducting a transaction on your behalf because you paying me extra. I mean, it happens all the time. As much laws as we have, you already have people going to jail for money laundering all the time. You be trying to figure out how in the world. Yes. In trading is the same thing. People trading for other people on behalf of other people. People swinging people as it relates to trading because people trading and they know what they're supposed to be doing and how they're supposed to be doing it. We've been talking about these front stores on Bay Street from the last class. If you know cruise ships coming in, who you selling to? And you know us payments, we only going on time to John Bull. So where the rest of y'all, how y'all still in business? Ain't no parking on Bay Street. Bay Street closed after a certain hour. What are going on time for? You remember we talked about that? When you pass and you see all these stores popping up, like where y'all come from? Yeah, because remember now, jewelry stores come under the compliance commission. Well, I mean, and they should have that training because the compliance commission mandates that their employees are trained in AML, CFTPF, right? Yeah, because remember now, think about it. When you are employed by an entity that comes under like the compliance commission, you do the annual training, right? So even if you in a specific employee that's selling the merchandise or whatever it is, if you see something out of the way, you are mandated to tell your designated MLRO. Jewelry stores have designated MLROs because they come under the compliance commission. You think John Bull, you think you could walk up in John Bull, buy a Rolex, and someone somewhere don't know that, apart from the fact that Rolex is a registered product, right? That has to be declared. You don't just bust up in John Bull and spend 40 grand, 50 grand on a Rolex and the compliance commission don't know. Somebody has to know because that has to be reported. Yes? Yeah. Same thing with certain cars. If you purchase a car over $100,000 in this country, someone somewhere in the compliance commission know that. And if they don't know it, if they don't report it at the, I'm thinking it only could be Omega Motors or the Mercedes dealership, right? Tire Flex or Omega. If Omega or Tire Flex don't report it, when that check hit the bank, it's going to be reported. Yes. And if when that check hit the bank, nobody reports it, when it gets to the insurance company, it's going to be reported. Because all of these companies and organizations are mandated to have money laundering reporting officers that do reporting on large transactions. You can just roll up to Tire Flex with a $120,000 check, buy a Mercedes, and ain't nobody know. Someone somewhere that has to report it at least twice, because the insurance company has to report it, because any vehicle that's going to be insured over, I think it is $100,000 has to be reported, because then they have to do a source of funds. The insurance company is the same thing. Even with your life insurance, I don't know if you guys know, but if you have a large life insurance, they have to do a source of funds declaration on you. How you could afford this? Who paying for this life insurance? Because the Insurance Commission of the Bahamas mandates them to get this information, right? Correspondent banking. I think we talked about that before last week. Every bank in this country, if you're going to do any kind of transactions outside of the Bahamas, you need a correspondent banking relationship, because we cannot, the B dollar does not go past our borders. May up more like when you go in Miami, you know, and they got them little currency things so you could change that B dollar for whatever, right? We're talking about generally using the financial system. So you need a correspondent bank to be the in-between to enable you to do transactions in US dollar. So there are risks involving when I'm changing currency, and the correspondent bank has to know your clients, and I can tell you they have to know your clients' clients. Other than that, they will de-risk you and de-bank you. Remember some time ago, we were talking about de-risking and losing your correspondent banking relationships? Because if they ain't comfortable with your clients' clients, because their client is the bank, right? And so as an end client to the bank, I'm the correspondent banking client's client. Y'all remember a couple of years ago, one day Western Union at Fidelity was open, the next day it was shut down? Anybody remember that?
Yes.
Oh.
They lost
Wow.
their correspondent banking relationship overnight.
Yeah.
Because their correspondent banking was not satisfied that the Western Union was conducting the KYC that they needed. It wasn't about the Western Union per se, because the Western Union was being operated by Fidelity, which is a licensed financial institution in the Bahamas, right? So they had no issues with Fidelity. They had issues with Fidelity's end client of Western Union. Shut down. You all remember Western Union and across the Caribbean was just shutting down? It wasn't until Grace Kennedy came back up a couple of years ago, and then they started pop. Y'all don't take it notice of these things that happen in the country, or because y'all in financial services, y'all ain't aware of it.
And I don't deal with a lot of Western Union affairs, but I think I
It
heard
makes
some.
news because people was carrying on bad.
Yeah, I remember them shutting down.
Yeah, I remember portions of it, but I don't remember it specifically. I remember it was some issue, but I can't say I remember it specifically.
Right. It was
Yeah,
like
I'm familiar with it.
sending monies to family anywhere. You went in today and you were saying, okay, the family's going to get the money the next day, but they shut down the next day, so it couldn't be processed. So you was carrying on where your money is, and the family was carrying on. You didn't send the money. You see, it was a big deal. Grace Kennedy is the franchise holder in the Caribbean, I think, for Western Union, but Grace Kennedy of MLRO.
Wow.
And all of Grace Kennedy's Western Union franchisors have a very stringent compliance regime in place. When you go to Western Union these days, they ask you all kind of information, just like you go into the bank. Because in order to keep their correspondent banking relationship, they need to be able to say to their correspondent banker, we have identified who is using us, right, to transfer funds. So they wanted to decrease the vulnerability of the money service business. So that's what they had to do. I know it's like 12:33 now. If you have to leave, I'm quite fine with that, but I want us to finish this before we go. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, continue. I mean, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Mr. Ferguson has given us his blessing. Is everybody okay with that?
That's fine.
Yes.
That's fine.
You get me, man.
Mr. Ferguson in charge it around here. Omnibus accounts. These are accounts where they pool money. Those are really risky accounts, but that would be at the institution level. It poses a very significant risk. However, there are mitigating factors that are involved. Central bank don't allow you to have omnibus accounts as a financial institution, but I'm sure that at that level, at the regulator level, they manage omnibus accounts. Lending and credit facilities, we all know how you could commit money laundering in the loan space. Yes?
Yep.
Because y'all know, why y'all being quiet, man? Y'all know we borrow money for vacation, but we really do it. We say vacation because then they ain't got no check to write to nobody, but we take that money and do something else with it.
Yep.
That could be considered money laundering depending on what you were doing with it. Because you lie. The intent, remember, money laundering is all about the intent. You concealing, you getting the money legally, mind you, but you're concealing the purpose for which the money is going to be used.
Okay. We all guilty.
Depending on if the thing that you use it for legal or not. Yeah, it could be legal. So then you just committed, it's actually fraudulent in that case. You committed a fraud when you lied to the bank, which is still illegal and criminal in nature, right? However, when you go into the bank, and you know the banks in the Bahamas is the retail banks, right? When you go to get a loan, they want everything. They even ask the color of what you have on today underneath your clothes because they will make sure they covered, right? There are also back-to-back loans you can get before you finish paying off one loan good, or you get a loan, pay it off quickly because you get some money, right? That you don't really want to disclose. You were able to pay that loan off. But then because you want the loan to look legitimate, you go back to the bank, right? To get another bank loan because the bank will give you a check, right? And in between there, you're doing some commingling. Yes?
Okay.
So you can launder funds like that because you paying back off the money quickly because you get some money legally. Yes. But what you want to do something legitimate, you go back to the bank and the bank will probably lend it to you because you're a good customer. You pay off early. So you can launder money in that regard as well. And then there's mortgage lending. Some people buy homes and they just buy homes because they could put down that deposit, but they get illegally, and the bank will lend them the mortgage. Yes. And then you could use whatever illegal monies you gain to hurry pay back the mortgage. But then, because you had a mortgage, and once you don't pay off your mortgage, your bank give you your documents back. You just legitimize all the illegal funds that you had. Yes. Credit cards, we all know we could use them. Internet, computer games, and the use of credit cards. You all see how some of these games is when you pay to, like, real money to play these games. In this virtual world, my nieces be asking my sister if she could use a credit card to play game. Is you crazy?
Roblox is the new thing now.
Well, see, I know what they is because I am no small children, but are you crazy? No, you can't have my credit card. I'm sorry, not to play no game.
I know with Roblox, the children, you could use the credit card to buy what they call Roblox, some Roblox currency to buy things in the game. They getting really crafty.
Well, miss, I can tell you, I ain't no small children. But when my children ask me for my credit card, I need to see, feel, taste, and touch what they buy in. It ain't gonna be nothing virtual, nothing. Unless, of course, it's a virtual event, right? For some training or some learning purpose or some form of entertainment. But Roblox, what it is, Roblox? It's a no, complete no. As a matter of fact, I'm big on internet gaming anyway, so you definitely ain't getting my money. And I know that people is be doing all kind of like Super Bowl tomorrow, how much betting and going on online, whatever they call them, right? I mean, big money, big grown men to be betting. You ain't winning. You ain't getting $1 from if the Kansas City Chiefs win or whoever next come, nothing. But you can make money because you betting. And I ain't talking about the legal betting. You get whatever, however, whatever they term it, right? They be doing their own sports betting, which obviously could be legal because the people who join it, obviously they think they fans and they could foresee who will win the NFL or whatever the case may be. That's fine. But then you could also be mingling all kind of other things in there because with these games, you could be talking and dealing with people from all around the world. My brother likes to play NFL Madden, and sometimes I go to my mom's house and I knock on his door and he having the biggest conversation. I'm like, who the hell you talking to? Hush man, you interrupting me, man. I'm in a game. What? Nigga, you 32. What are you doing? But they honestly, like, they spend real money, you use real money, and all of this online people you ain't never meet. I'm like, I work too hard for my money. We ain't going on that road. No. See, and then it says cyber laundering, electronic payments, and emerging technologies, all these things online. If I don't know you and you ain't name like Amazon or, I buying some shoe or something, no, I ain't giving you my credit card information. It's a no. I ain't playing no games. Because when you're using your card online, you ain't know how the hackers could get in through the back door to get your information. There are people that they troll all day and they steal your credit card information and then they sell it on the black market. They sell your credit card to somebody else. It happens. So you have to be really cautious when you allow your card to be used online. One of the FATF typology speaks to, I'm on page 176 in my book, prepaid stored value cards. That's one of the ways they were saying terrorism was financed for a very long time. You walk into Walmart and you buy these gift cards, right? And then you have mobile payments, you have electronic purses, you have internet payment systems. People don't need to go into the bank physically at all. As a matter of fact, the bank discouraging you from coming in. You're doing $1,000, don't come. You deposit them on a $5,000, let me charge you to discourage you from doing that. They want you to do bank to bank transaction. You know why? They could follow it better. They could trace it better. Cash is untraceable. Yes? So we have to make sure that all of these payment types, right? Credit card, anything electronic, it's vulnerable. Bitcoin, Silk Road, I don't know if you all remember that, but that example you all need to read because people were buying people, buying guns, buying human organs, all on Silk Road. When the FBI brings Silk Road down, I mean, it was a huge deal in the financial world. Huge. You would be surprised to know what you could find on the black market for sale. They get more savvy now, they ain't using dollars, they're using Bitcoin and all the other types of electronic payments, right? Virtual currency is, cryptocurrency is. I'm sure there's a Silk Road somewhere on the internet. Please read that example with Bitcoin and Silk Road. It's an old example, but it is still very true. People use their phones to launder money. In Africa, they've been doing phone-to-phone transactions for years. Sending money by phone. And people think money don't have to be big amounts. Big amounts don't finance terrorism. Is a large number of small amounts that fund terrorism. Because big amounts could be easy to detect. If 3 million people send in $10, that's a lot of money, right? But it's only $10. Anybody can notice it's only $10 because it's a very small amount, right? Non-face-to-face, digital virtual currencies. These are things that we are dealing with every single solitary day. Digital precious metals. Did you ever think that we'd get to that? How you can have a digital precious metal account? But obviously, gold and precious metals are traded, right? A lot of people don't hold gold bars physically anymore, at least not in the Bahamas for sure, because of the weight. A gold bar is typically very heavy. So everything else virtual, they have digital precious metals, right? Internet gambling and land-based casinos, well, we all know how that could go. And Annie works at a casino, so I'm sure she is seeing some things happen, right? Sports betting is legal in the Bahamas. You could go to Bahamas and legally sports bet. I don't know if it's the casino is open back up and you can do it, but it's legal in the Bahamas.
Today is very busy in Bimini at Resort World with sports betting today.
Resort World open, Annie?
Yes, I'm to work right now.
Oh, I thought they were, I didn't realize they opened back up. I gotta make a trip to Bimini. I love Resort World.
Yeah, sports betting is big. Starting last night, we booming.
Yeah, because NFL tomorrow.
Yeah.
Super Bowl tomorrow. So all kind of
Yeah.
people betting money. See, I cheat.
Yeah.
I like spending money on me. So for me, if the possibility of me losing it, great. The answer is no, I ain't doing it. I don't, is sports betting open to Bahamians, Annie? I don't think so. It's like
no, but we have, like you touched earlier with the Biminites, most of them are American and whole American passports.
Yep.
So if they can see, they can show that they just came on the island or something like that and they're not residents, they can bet.
Like them said who break curfews on the beach dancing and use the Florida license. Like seriously? Anyway, yes. So that's a vulnerability in the sector, right?
Yes.
Right. International trade and trade finance, everything that is used in the world, at least 75% of goods that is used in the world is shipped, comes on a container somewhere, and trade finance money laundering is a huge deal globally. Huge. Those erroneous numbers go up and down depending on which way they want it to go, right? So trade finance is a huge deal, over invoicing and under invoicing goods. Now in the Bahamas terms, that's when you say the car costs $5,000 when you know you pay 10. Because if customs could charge you 65% on the 10, it makes sense. But if you say 5 and you getting it from auction, then they going by what the auction price is, right? But now they can't tell you how much you pay to fix it. So we over invoice some things and then we under invoice some things depending on what we want to achieve, right?
Yeah.
We good at that in the Bahamas. And then falsely describing goods, we talked about that from a customs perspective. Everything, tags off everything. How in the world you been away for a week and come up with 3 suitcases and everything you wear or everything you carry? We know better, right? You evading customs. Letters of credit is usually used in companies where they would get a letter of credit from a financial institution to try and buy like bulk shipment of goods, and then they commingle some things. You lose your money. You got to put the money up. Jarell is asking about clarification on betting. So Jarell, how the betting works is you bet, you literally bet. You use your account at the gaming houses. They have accounts. Mama, I told you, once you reach, you have to set up an account to gamble, right? You don't just gamble with your debit card or whatever. You have to fund that account. So if you bet $10,000 that the Kansas City Chiefs could win, I know the Chiefs because my family lives in Kansas and they like going stupid crazy because they're in the NFL tomorrow. I mean, in Super Bowl tomorrow. So putting that money up already. Once, if the Chiefs lose, you could forget about it. But that money already sitting on that account. So just like how you fund your savings account, you fund your gaming account.
But if they lose, you lose your money.
Yeah, that's the whole point of betting. But if you win, then you win some money. It's just like buying numbers.
You're achieving money laundering if you lose money.
But if the money was illegal to begin with, if you get the money illegally, right? You don't care if you lose it. However, if you win, you just clean your money. Yeah. Evasion of sanctions and proliferation finance risk through trade finance. Like I say, if you're doing business with high-risk countries or countries that you know could possibly be sanctioned, then you do some things differently, right? Proliferation financing is all about financing guns and weapons of mass destruction. And we know the Bahamas don't make guns, but we get plenty here, right? So obviously something is going on that should not be going on. Black market peso exchange, that's for those countries that have their dollar isn't worth much, but they do a lot of exchange to US dollar. Red flag indicators, there are certain discrepancies that you should be familiar with in the compliance department, that it should say, hold on, something wrong with this, right? This ain't really making sense, or this product is very risky. Let's take a closer look at it. Things that you just know from a practical standpoint, something's off with it. Wealth management, we know private banking. We talked about that a lot. How private banking can be used because the client live in someplace else. They have plenty of money, the confidentiality that's involved, the secrecy that's involved. There are some countries that are known to be corrupt. You could move monies easily through private banking accounts, or more easily than you think in a retail account. Then obviously you could use commercial activities as well, could be conducted through your private banking account. Because if you have a private banking account and you're a business owner, we don't know if that's your personal money or your company money, right?
Okay.
So that private banking product could be exploited very easily. There's investment management services and securities. We all know how people do all kinds of nonsensical things and illegal things using investments. And if you think about it, when people are doing illegality, they don't mind losing a percentage of the monies, because to them, that's the cost of doing business, right? So when you think about it from a compliance perspective, if the transaction don't make sense, question it. Because regular people like me and y'all, we ain't trying to lose no money, right? But if a client is okay with losing some degree of money, which of course, I'm not talking about just regular risk with investment products. I'm talking about above that. You have to think about why they okay with losing that money. Because if you have $1 million illegal money and you lose 100,000, but you get the 900,000 clear, you ain't mind losing 100,000. That's 10%, right? Because to have the 900,000 clear, you still good. Corporate finance, that's for like companies when they do financing. Venture capital, private equity, commodities, all of these are products which have vulnerabilities. Stock broking, investment management, fund products. As retail clients, we won't know a lot of about having funds, because in the Bahamas we don't really, as Bahamians, we don't necessarily use fund products, but obviously in the private world, private finance world, fund products. Market manipulation, when people just buy a lot of stocks and then dump it, pump and dump schemes. Obviously drug trafficking, we know that here in the Bahamas. Stock manipulation, because BISX isn't a very active stock exchange. It's very hard to commit stock manipulation on BISX, but obviously it can be done. The possibility exists. Spread betting and drug dealing, we know how we could connect the two of them, right? You're using the profits from your drug dealing to do some betting, just like Jarrell and I were speaking. Retail investment funds, you can do that in the Bahamas. And then life insurance and pensions. Some people take out life insurances where you pay the premium up front. You don't let it mature. They're going to give you some of the money back. You would have just cleaned dirty money if you use dirty money to buy it, right? So these are all just products that can be vulnerable to AML, PF, and CFT, cross-border activity. We know we can take money across borders and do certain things. Pension funds, MSBs, that's what we were talking about, excuse me, earlier, as it relates to Western Union, or I can't remember the next one name. Whatever it is, when you transfer money through a money service as opposed to a bank. Money remitters, which is similar to MSBs. Non-financial professionals. Now we know back in the day, lawyers and accountants had a name for keeping their client money, because they all had client accounts. And we know as gatekeepers, they're now regulated. So it's not as easy and it's not as vulnerable to use a lawyer or an accountant. But back in the day, all the drug dealers had their money with the lawyers, right?
Yep.
Their accountants. Y'all remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Pardon?
Yes, we do.
And trust and corporate service providers, obviously we can be used, when I say we as a trust and corporate service provider, we can be used to help clients launder money. We shouldn't, but we can. So there's a vulnerability to that as well. Corporate service providers, but remember, this is why everything that was not regulated comes under the Compliance Commission to enable regulators to kind of clamp down on the vulnerabilities of all of these products. Because you could misuse a corporate vehicle. Remember the Panama Papers? Now we all know people could use companies for various legal reasons, and then people could use it for illegal reasons, right? Bearer share companies, you can't do in the Bahamas no more. You can still do in certain countries. IBCs, we don't allow shell corporations and companies in the Bahamas no more. So that's a no-no. That's not a vulnerability because it's no longer allowed. We do have trustee services, but the trusts are very well regulated in the Bahamas. And like we spoke earlier about ultimate beneficial owners, we still have to know, even with corporate vehicles, we have to know who the beneficial owner is, right? So all of those things, there are laws in place that try to mitigate against the vulnerabilities attached to the products and services. There are lots of trusts, types of trusts. We can see them all here, but the trust industry is governed by the Central Bank of the Bahamas. So there are laws in place and policies and procedures in place to ensure that whatever the risks involved and the vulnerabilities attached to these products are actually mitigated. Once you're in business, there's a level of risk attached to doing so, right? So it's all about the mitigation of risk, the avoidance of some risks you can't avoid. And then if you can't mitigate it, then you decide whether or not you want to have that risk as an organization. Yes?
Yep.
It's a lot, but it's something that you need to know. Chapter 5 was a lot, but they're just products. You could familiarize yourself with the products, but generally speaking, it's products that cover the entire industry. Not that you're going to have to know all of the products. Yes?
Okay.
Okay.
Products.
The products, the chapter 5 is pretty much about the products and the vulnerabilities. So, any questions? I'm sorry for taking so long, but I wanted to finish 5 today, so we don't have to come back to this next week.
Okay. Agreed.
We are in good standing. We're compliant in the majority of our AML. Our AML framework is one of the best in the world. I can proudly say that.
Agreed, 100%.
Yes, you can go on FADF's website and look at our mutual evaluation report, but we're off the blacklist. So obviously we're doing something good, something right. Even though we feel, that it's a lot, we're doing something right. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, I know we talked a lot today and my throat is getting dry because I've been speaking for hours now. So if there are any questions about the chapters we went over this week, drop it inside the chat group. So when we come next week, we will be ready to discuss chapters 6 through 8. If we don't get through chapters 6 through 8 next week, we have a following class on February 20th, which was supposed to be specific for answering the question, but we can kind of, use that and be flexible if we don't get through chapters 6 to 8. I don't want us to go over next week, 12:30. So let's do that. Please read as much as you can. Just so that when we come to class next week, we can have lively and provocative discussions. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great week and be safe, everyone.
Okay. Same to you.
Thank you. Do the same.
I will drop the barcode link inside our chat group if you're interested in registering. It's a free event, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Have a good week.
All right,
Be
thank
safe
you.
all.
Right.
No, thank you.